Hi, and welcome back to Goodnight Rita, a deep dive series all about Groundhog Day and other time loop stories in popular culture. This is part 2 of the full series edit. In part 1, we looked in depth at Groundhog Day itself, and in this we're going to look at a list of other films and TV shows that fall under the umbrella of time loop stories. Here are the time codes for each episode if you want to skip ahead, but I recommend, just grabbing a snack or a drink, sitting back, and enjoying it all in order. Subscribe to the channel for more deep dives like this, and let me know in the comments what your favourite time loops are. Very few people have heard of the movie 1201, but it's a time loop movie that came out the very same year as Groundhog Day, 1993, and has a lot of remarkable similarities.
Please wait.
Well, what if there is no tomorrow? There wasn't one today.
Mom, I'll call you back. The day's repeating.
The first time I saw you, something happened to me.
And I've fallen in love with a beautiful young lady, and so far I could only see her for a few hours.
When this movie is discussed online, it's usually along the lines of wondering if Groundhog Day was plagiarized, which we'll talk about. But regardless, I think it's genuinely kind of a shame more people haven't seen it. So, I just want to tell you about it. 1201 is a 90-minute TV movie directed by Jack Shoulder. It was written by Richard Lupoff, Jonathan Heap, and Philip Morton. Richard Lupoff is the author of the original short story published in a 1973 issue of the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction, and Jonathan Heap had previously adapted it into an Oscar-nominated short film starring Kurtwood Smith. This feature-length adaptation stars Jonathan Silverman as Barry Thomas, a lovable underachiever working a dead-end job in the HR department of a large scientific research company. He's opposite Helen Slater as Lisa Fredericks, a scientist Barry has had a secret crush on for a very long time. It features a bunch of other familiar faces, including Jeremy Piven and Danny Trejo, who's on screen for about 12 seconds and says 2 lines.
This day's about to repeat.
Yeah, no kidding, Biff. They're all about the same around here.
Barry's day starts off like any other. He speaks to his mum on the phone, interacts with his neighbors, gets stuck in traffic, and arrives late.
The whole office rattled. You slow down the work and we all suffer, you know that.
Let's hug. Just once. It'll break the tension.
He witnesses Lisa getting assassinated by sketchy dudes in a van. After drowning his sorrows, he returns home. But before falling asleep, he gets electrocuted.
The time is 12:01.
And wakes up, you guessed it, back at the start of the same day. Barry starts to piece together what's happening. The time bounce, as they call it, is a result of the lab's particle accelerator misfiring, and Barry is the only person who's aware of it. We meet more and more of the lab team, and he also builds a rapport and romance with Lisa. In one loop, he attempts to warn the police about the attack, only to find himself locked up on suspicion of being involved. The following loop, he vows to save her.
Today I save her.
Which leads to a car chase, and ends with a romantic hideout in a log cabin. The plot thickens and danger escalates over the following couple of loops. I won't go into too much detail, but it leads to a final showdown in the accelerator itself. The loop is successfully broken, and our heroes share a kiss as they get arrested by the cops. All in all, I think this is actually a pretty great little movie. I've watched it a couple of times, and it was one of my early favorites in this research. It's got great characters, with most of the cast delivering pretty memorable performances. Jeremy Piven is an excellent agent of chaos as always, and the chemistry between the romantic leads, while maybe a bit rushed, feels believable to me. It also doesn't quite carry the same question marks as the romance between Phil and Rita. Lisa is far more willing every time to believe in the loop, because for her, it's rooted in science she understands. She approaches it like a scientist and is convinced by the evidence when it's properly presented to her. The way this movie approaches sex is also kind of fun, it's kind of notable. There's this scene where they're getting to know each other again, and Lisa realizes that they slept together in a previous loop. And she says,
"Are you saying that did you get lucky?" Oh my God, you got lucky.
You got lucky too. It wasn't just me.
This is so strange.
I know.
It's kind of awkward and cheesy. I don't know. This will land very differently with different people. But I enjoyed 1201's kind of sex-positive attitude. Barry doesn't play games, he doesn't trick Lisa, and Lisa doesn't get upset by this revelation. She trusts him, and she trusts herself, and it diffuses tension rather than adding to it. I also think this movie might have a better car chase than Groundhog Day. Look at this. I mean, it's tense, it's kinetic, we know where all the players are. I think for a movie at this scale, they should be really genuinely proud of that. There are negatives too, of course. For starters, the music is bad. The music it's just bad.
Into my office.
I'm pretty sure most of it is library music, but I have no idea where they would have sourced this from in the early 90s. In the credits, there's a music editor and a music mixer, but no original music or composer credit. There are 2 pieces of music with vague titles credited to William Peterkin and various other people, but I couldn't find anything about them or him anywhere. Unfortunately for some audiences, the repetitive and bland music in this movie is going to be a turn-off. And it's a reminder just how much is added to the production value by the right music, especially a bespoke score, which can be made to follow the action more closely, rather than, picking tracks off the shelf and having to work with the limitation of them already being, finalized. I think the shortcuts taken with exposition in 1201 are sometimes very clunky or feel rushed. The biggest example of this being the TV news segment that we see when Barry starts the loop.
Mary, big news at Utrell Corporation. Researchers here working on particle physics believe they've discovered a way to accelerate a subatomic particle.
I actually think it's okay that we know so early on what caused the loop. In a similar fashion to Groundhog Day, we don't want the audience distracted asking why the entire time, and it lets Lisa's murder and the conspiracy become the main focus. But it could definitely be achieved more gracefully than a news report just straight up saying what's happening in the first 5 minutes.
Time and space would be shattered. We'd be punched backwards in time, and then move forward until the accelerator is fired again, and we're punched back again in an endless loop.
There are also some pretty cheesy effects used between loops, some more subtle than others, and they're also not consistent. This transition is the most indulgent, that isn't like any of the other transitions, and it's unnecessary. Again, for me, this feels like a reminder that before Groundhog Day, we just didn't have this visual trope that everybody understands. Nowadays, it feels like common sense, especially if you're on a budget, that a simple hard cut would probably have done a better job.
The time is 7:30.
Both the interview exposition and the cheesy effects are hangovers from the preceding short film, 12:01 PM, and considering how much this movie already departs, turning it into this far more pleasing, heroic rom-com with a happy ending, elements like this might have felt to some people on the team like The Last Bastion, spiritual links to the source material. Or just, hey, it was the 90s and we can do this now, let's have some fun. So what do 1201 and Groundhog Day have most in common? And what sets them most apart? I've talked a lot about the visuals of Groundhog Day, and I think it's fascinating that 1201 managed to kind of nail exactly the process I've described, at least at first. It's a budget movie shot for economy about a man living the same day over. Why wouldn't you just set up the shot and run it several times in exactly the same way? But then as the story demands entirely new sequences of events, that cinematic language is diluted far more quickly than it is in Groundhog Day. There are far fewer loops in 1201. By my count in the film, we only see 6 days. However, there's definitely room for Barry to have looped longer than that in order for him to learn the things that he learns. And because we know from pretty much the start what's causing them, the text isn't burdened with the same philosophical concerns as Groundhog Day. Barry seems to be a pretty nice guy, if a bit of a loser. He's not in need of redemption, and his loop isn't treated as a kind of purgatory or teaching moment. It's connected to a fixed point, similar to Phil's, but its cause is a machine, a physical thing that just needs to be turned off. And this is because, really, 1201 is a very different movie. Aside from surface level differences, Barry doesn't need to see the light or connect with the common man. It has a romantic subplot, but it isn't all about romance. 1201 is far more concerned with using the loop to uncover a murder mystery, and delivering some fun twists and a bit of action along the way. It's a whodunit, and through the accident of Barry getting caught in this time bounce, he becomes the only person who can solve it. I personally don't think Groundhog Day plagiarized 1201. Nothing I've seen supports that. While it is remarkable that they came out in the same year, the two are very different, and more importantly, have completely different origins. One is a philosophical romance that, with Ramis' guiding hand, became a Capra-esque modern morality tale. The other is a fun, budget murder mystery whose ancestry can be traced to the brilliant pulp science fiction scene of the 1970s. What I will say is, I think people should watch 1201. I started doing these videos to talk positively about stuff that I love, and I love 1201. I genuinely recommend it. I think it's really fun. You can find it in okay quality in various places online, but I think it's worth purchasing if you can. I got it for $7.99 on iTunes, and I can vouch I think the quality is pretty good. I'm a sucker for an underdog movie with a great cast, and I think that this one does loads of things really well. This isn't a review channel, and it's never going to be, but I really liked 1201, and I think you might too. Did you know there's a 2004 Italian Groundhog Day remake? It's called Stork Day, and it's about a grumpy, womanizing wildlife presenter who gets stuck on a small island in the Canaries, living the same day over and over. Of course you didn't, why would you? So I'm going to tell you about it. Today we're talking about Epxerience, aka Stork Day, an Italian-Spanish co-production directed by Giulio Manfredonia. It stars Antonio Albanese, Fabio De Luigi, and Goya Toledo. It comes in at 90 minutes, slightly shorter than the original. According to Screen Daily, it took around €4 million to make, and while it has a lot of similarities...
Uno? Do you ever have deja vu, Mrs. Lancaster?
I don't think so, but I could check with the kitchen.
Signora, lei ha mai avuto un déjà vu?
Non so. Vado a vedere in cucina.
That sums it up for me.
Sembra la storia della mia vita.
It also has some fascinating differences.
Uccelli di merda!
I don't think you need to watch this movie unless you really, really want to, so here's a brief synopsis. We open on Filippo, our Italian Phil, presenting a nature documentary about a groundhog, tipping a hat to the original, only to learn that it's all on a green screen. Walking and talking through the studio offices, we learn that he's both an entitled diva and a raging misogynist. He makes a co-worker he just slept with cry and quit her job. And his producer sends him on a field trip as a punishment, covering a small group of nesting storks who have somehow ended up in the Canary Islands. We also meet Enrico, our Italian Larry, who draws the short straw and has to go with him. Arriving on the island, we meet Rita, who's still just called Rita. He wakes up on August 13th to a ferry horn and his blaring alarm clock radio. As he leaves his room, a light fixture falls off the wall, a shady biker-looking guy leaves the woman opposite's room, and a kid bumps into him, covering his pants in sugar. We meet Rosa, this film's version of Mrs. Lancaster, an old man begging for cigarettes, whose name we'll learn later is Carlos, and he joins the expedition party late. We also meet our Italian Ned, a less successful but very cheery fellow nature documentarian who's really excited to see him. Filippo delivers his piece to camera but gets cut short when one of the Storks attacks him for touching their nest. They learn it isn't possible to leave the island due to a huge storm, so he has no choice but to return to the bed and breakfast, where he promptly sleeps with this character, Candela. We also see Enrico saying goodnight to Marta across the hall and completely fumbling it. After kicking out his booty call, Filippo finds a stork in his bedroom and struggles to shoo it out. He wakes up the next day, and it's August 13th again. Alarm clock, broken light, shades, kid with buns, Rosa, old man, late for the drive. He attempts to get ahead of the storm, but the only boat departing in the AM breaks down. He's stuck living Stork Day again and again. He sees a doctor, which of course we know doesn't help. Then he tries staying up all night with Enrico, only to fall asleep sitting up and return to the same point. Drinking a bowl of sangria by himself, he wonders why he couldn't have repeated a much nicer day, and we meet our Spanish doppelgangers of Ralph and Gus.
Amico, non ti scoraggiare. L'Italia vincerà ancora, vedrai. La palla è rotonda.
This kicks off a long segment where Filippo does whatever he wants with no consequences. He deliberately breaks the light, he trips over the little boy, punches Bob, calls everyone in his phone book and admits to terrible things he's done.
Sono sempre piaciuti gli uomini che ballano bene.
He takes a fancy to Marta, the girl across the hall, and the next loop ambushes her for a fake interview to get information. Then he dresses up like a biker boy and seduces her. Then he proceeds to fuck everyone on the island, including at least one guy. And then he gets bored.
Siete noiose. Tutti uguali. Basta.
Finally, 44 minutes in, he starts to really take an interest in Rita. This kicks off a brief dating segment a lot like the original, but he can't quite crack what she wants and gets frustrated. He also can't seem to stop himself attacking little kids. Later, he discovers Rita has a son and overhears her giving him some advice, telling him if he doesn't learn to be kind, he'll end up alone and sad like the bald Italian man. So on the next loop, he tries to do good deeds and seems pleasantly surprised when he starts to enjoy it. He shares this lovely moment with Rita in the bed and breakfast, and later, before the loop starts again, he kind of prays, pleading that Rita remembers something. But she doesn't, and Filippo hits bottom. Then, from somewhere, it's unexplained,
Bene. Buoni. Uccelli di merda!
he gets a machine gun, I'm not joking, and murders the Storks, then turns it on himself.
Adesso dammi quell'arma.
Following his suicide, Filippo builds himself back up. There's a short montage of him kind of contemplating nature with the Storks. Enrico comes to find him and slips and injures himself, and they genuinely bond as he helps him back down into town. Then he takes an interest in the old man, Carlos, but is unable to save him from dying of a heart attack later that night. Following this, at about 1 hour and 10 minutes, we begin what will be Filippo's final August 13th. He gives a moving, heartfelt performance beside the nesting Storks, then runs off to what he calls an important appointment, giving Carlos a perfect last day. When Rita gets suspicious and goes to intervene, he confesses what's happening and uses his knowledge of the day to convince her. He also confesses how much he knows about her and that he tried courting her unsuccessfully. And he shows her some of the more enjoyable things he's discovered along the way, like an auction where he likes to kind of cause chaos by outbidding people. They get ice cream with her son, and along the way he gives Enrico some romantic advice. Rita asks at one point if there's anything he hasn't done before, so they ditch the party and go night swimming and end up getting late night snacks at the bed and breakfast. Rita stays the night, and Enrico finally plucks up the courage to go for it with Marta. The next morning, after a brief fake out with the radio, we know how this goes. We learn that Rita is still there. Time has resumed its course, It's August 14th, it's raining, and Filippo remembers he may have bought a truckload of pigs. So that's Stork Day. And I want to run down some positives and negatives, as well as highlighting specific parts that I think are worth comparing and contrasting with the original. Firstly, the biggest thing that we need to acknowledge here, the most notable thing about this movie, is simply that it is a remake. Throughout this series, we're going to talk about a lot of films that have in some way copied or been inspired by Groundhog Day. But this is a bona fide remake in a sea of homages. The makers of this film took a chance and paid $150,000 for the rights to the screenplay. And it remains one of the relatively few European remakes of an American movie, not the other way round. Unfortunately, I don't think it does a great job. It looks pretty rough throughout. This may be the transfer that I'm watching on the DVD. I don't know, but it looks pretty bad, lacking the visual refinement of the original. The music feels less deliberate, and although there are some really good performances here, a lot of the story feels far looser and less impactful. This is actually something that's kind of great for us, although it's unfortunate for the filmmakers, because seeing how Stork Day does some things maybe not so well highlights just how crucial to the success of the original they were. Take our main character, for example. Albanese is probably as good a casting choice as you could make, but his Phil is far too cruel and immature. Our very first introduction to him in the studio goes way beyond anything Phil does, even in his darkest moments. Like we've said before, there's this kind of fine line where we need Phil to be somewhat likable. The audience needs to want to see this person succeed. But Filippo is so much of a dick early on, it makes that harder. And although, of course, I'm losing some of the performance in translation, I don't feel he brings the necessary charm to balance that out. He's not like a lovable dick, he's just a dick.
Cosa penso della politica di Arnar? Sì?
Grazie. No, lo so che l'hai fatto per me perché hai visto che mi piaceva. Grazie.
Ah sì, se non ci si aiuta tra amici. Ciao! Tu cosa ne pensi della politica di Arnar? Cosa ne pensa della politica di Arnar? Ma fa cagare, va!
I think this movie, in a lot of places, makes too explicit some things that were left a bit more vague and implied in the original. Filippo being far more cruel and taking his newfound freedom a little bit too far is one of them. In early loops, we see this guy manipulate and seduce his way across the entire island, starting with the woman he knows his cameraman has a crush on. And when he turns suicidal, he also attacks the birds in a pretty reckless manner, right? He literally gets a gun from somewhere and puts a lot of people in danger. This is a violent, gluttonous guy who seems to have far less respect for other people than our original Phil. We also have a less memorable Ned. We don't need every character to be exactly the same, but I think Bob here is never going to measure up to Tobolowsky's Ned, and he has far less screen time. His role in the film is kind of diminished in this version. There's also a lot of reliance on montages and things like that rather than actually showing us deliberate planned sequences. I'm thinking in particular of his kind of awakening among the Storks. We move through this dreamy montage of him contemplating life rather than actually seeing the fruits of his growth. Fast forwarding through growth like this feels like it goes against what the story is about. Because this movie is a remake, we can actually directly compare scenes from both films. Take the scenes where Phil and Filippo meet their respective Ritas for the first time. In Stork Day, we first see Rita in a wide, busy fixing a car. Already, this suggests very different things about this character. She's hands-on, she's practical. This is very different from the impression we get from Rita in the original playing on the blue screen.
Se lei è la biologa, voglio dire.
Scusa, tieni qua un momento. Tienila stretta, mi raccomando. Siete gli italiani, vero?
Sì.
We also have Filippo introducing himself directly rather than observing from a distance. He makes a lame comment about her being surprisingly beautiful, and she rebuffs him.
Va bene, Filippo con 2 P. Se devi dirmi che una biologa bella è più rara del leone bianco, me lo dicono da quando ero all'università. Hai delle domande sulle cicogne?
Toast, eh?
It establishes a pretty different character for Rita and a very different dynamic for their relationship prior to the loop. The way this scene is constructed lacks that softness of Phil's first look at Rita and his deflection as he goes to leave.
She's fun, but not my kind of fun. I will be here for the 5.
We feel that distance between them. In this, he gets up close straight away. He touches a live wire and gets zapped, and doesn't go near it again for another 40 minutes. I'd also highlight that scene where Phil and Filippo wake up on the morning of their first loop. In the original, we have this now iconic, long developing shot that starts on the alarm clock, moves to Phil's face, follows him as he gets up and goes to the washroom. The equivalent scene here in Stork Day is cuts galore. We cut and we cut around the room as he gets up. It's more or less the same action, but it feels like a lot less time is spent here. The longer, uninterrupted take of the original gives us space to explore the frame and absorb what's happening. By comparison, the camera's eye in Stork Day feels frantic and disconnected. Okay, but what are some positives about this movie? There are things I like about this film. Firstly, I actually dig the intro. I think it's just a fun tip of the hat. It's a shame that it looks this ugly, but in spirit, I think it's a really funny kind of nod to the original. I do actually like Rita and Filippo's romance. On first viewing, I wasn't sure, but now I've watched it 3 times in preparation for this, and it does feel earned to me. It does work, in my opinion. A big part of that for me, I think, rests on her readiness to believe him, a bit like in 1201. This movie expends basically no time with Rita not believing him. I like that this version gives us far more time with certain characters and emphasizes specific relationships rather than lots of shorter encounters. We don't have the old ladies or the mayor or the married couple, and instead we get lots of Italian Larry, who even has his own arc. We get more of Rosa, and we get more of the old man, Carlos. These 3 people, in addition to his romance with Rita, come to define Filippo's journey in far stronger ways than their counterparts do in Groundhog Day. I also really like one of the other biggest departures in this version, and that's how and when Filippo tells Rita the truth. In the original, Phil attempts to convince Rita of the time loop at different points in the film, but in Stork Day, we only see it once, in the final loop. Rita sees him taking care of Carlos and is first charmed, then confused, then suspicious, and it seems to come out almost accidentally.
Aspetta, Martin!
Ferma! Stanotte Carlos morirà.
Cosa dici?
Vorrei che fosse felice almeno nel suo ultimo giorno di vita.
Doing it this way, connected to something so emotional, in a way that suggests he's kind of reluctant to confide in anyone about his situation, I think is really effective. There's this tired resignation to Albanese's performance at this point in the movie that really sells it too. In particular when he says, "I only know what will happen today."
Rimorchia tutto quello che si muove in paese, anche oggetti. Ma in realtà ha una storia d'amore con Martin, il tassista.
E come andrà a finire? Si rimettono insieme?
Non lo so. So solo quello che succede oggi.
And Toledo, for her part, totally sells this willingness to accept the time loop. Basically, the script combines 2 loops from the original. Phil's first true day with Rita, the one where they walk and talk and she ends up falling asleep next to him, and the last one, where he impresses her with his selflessness and she buys his freedom. This change is my favorite part of the film.
E cosa sai di me?
Quello che mi hai detto tu, quello che mi hai raccontato. Che sei rimasta incinta di un tuo compagno di scuola e tuo padre voleva strozzarti. Che a 18 anni ti sei iscritta in un movimento ambientalista e tuo padre voleva strozzarti. Che a Madrid vivevi in
Ti ho
via...
raccontato tutta la mia vita.
Io ti ho corteggiato a lungo.
Ma tra noi c'è stato qualcosa?
No, io volevo strozzarti.
Between this and the scene with her son, I think it does an admirable job of relating Filippo's redemption to Rita directly. And when she makes the suggestion to dip from the party, in a way, she gives him agency he thought he had lost. I think that lands pretty well, just like the Bachelor auction in the original. It's just unfortunate that most other big differences don't really seem to add anything. There's more loops in this than Groundhog Day. We actually see him fall asleep. The magical Stork and the connectedness of the Stork to the loops, the trip being explicitly a punishment, and the scene where he wishes for Rita to remember something. They're all kind of interesting to look at, but in my opinion, contribute very little, or even make the movie worse. It's kind of fascinating to me that this movie feels hamstrung by being an explicit remake. You know, the other movies that we're going to look at, they have the kind of free reign to take inspiration from Groundhog Day, but then infuse it with new ideas, different genres, or kind of add layers of complexity. The changes in this that I think are cool are held back by its attachment to another story. It's like only rewriting some paragraphs when really you should have started from scratch. The existence of Stork Day is kind of a niche oddity, and only really of interest to film nerds like us. For 90 minutes, we get to step into an alternate universe, where Groundhog Day was a low-budget foreign market movie that made a lot of different creative choices with the same material. And anytime you get the opportunity to see the same story told differently can be an opportunity for learning. If you're a filmmaker yourself, or a film student, you should definitely take the time to watch this side by side with the original, and think critically about what works and what doesn't. But as a viewer, it's kind of fitting that it feels like a waste of time. We are finally talking about Palm Springs. Let's do this. I love Palm Springs. It makes me laugh out loud, it makes me think, it's full of wonderful details that reward a rewatch, and a handful of really nice, surreal touches that add to its surprising depth. This is one of the best modern successors to Groundhog Day. Trust me, I've watched a lot. And it's one that, upon closer inspection, shares more DNA with it than the filmmakers ever intended, which I'm going to get to in a few minutes. Palm Springs follows Niles, a 30-something-year-old guy stuck at a wedding with his girlfriend who doesn't like him, and Sarah, the half-sister of the bride, who feels like an outcast in her family. Niles drinks throughout the day and generally goofs around like he doesn't care.
Let's dance.
But also seems to know exactly where to be and what everyone is going to do, as well as weirdly specific or intimate details about people. We soon learn that Niles is stuck living the same day over and over again. Sarah, who follows him into a mysterious cave, is now stuck too. Along with Roy, an aging father of two Niles once partied too hard with, and now periodically ventures from his home in Irvine to hunt Niles like an animal.
You're a sick fuck, Roy!
At its heart, Palm Springs is a love story about two sad people, scared to live their lives and be vulnerable. It was written by Andy Ciara and Max Barbaco, and directed by Barbaco, and this was a feature debut for both of them. It stars Andy Samberg, Kristen Milotti, and J.K. Simmons. It has a runtime of 90 minutes. It was put together by Samberg's company Lonely Island, along with Limelight and Sun Entertainment, and it was distributed by Hulu and Neon.
Life is meaningless. Let's get the fuck out of here.
Palm Springs was Andy Ciara's first feature script after graduating from AFI. So the story goes, he and Max, who had met at the film school, took a weekend away to brainstorm a story together in Palm Springs. They came away from that weekend with an initial idea and a character, a deeply nihilistic and unsubtly named guy on a bender in the desert. Over the following 2 years, it got further refined. And that process, from initial concept right through to the final product, seems to have followed a lot of steps you might recognize from talking about Groundhog Day. Bang! But it wasn't always a time loop.
started introducing some more of like the metaphysical elements to it all. A year and a half into it, and Max and I were just realizing there's a disconnect between this character. Like I just don't buy that he thinks life is meaningless. But then that's when the time loop stuff came in.
From what I read, the initial idea was far darker, and they weren't really sure where they were going with it until it became a love story. And once the cast were attached and actually, saying it out loud, a lot of the most memorable lines seem to be the result of work at the table and on location. I've read one of the kind of last production drafts of the script, which is available online. And from reading it, you can tell where certain parts have been workshopped in collaboration with the actors.
You ruined my plans! Sarah, the sister of the bride, and based on her accent, from origins unknown.
I love Palm Springs for so many reasons. It looks really, really good. Really nice, very competently shot, simple and true and sharp. It's got great lead performances. I think both Kristen Milotti and Andy Samberg just melt into their roles completely. I love it and I buy their chemistry. I think it's great. It has something which I'm always on the lookout for, which sadly is absent in a lot of modern films, and that's well-realized secondary characters. Take Daisy the bartender, played by Jenna Friedman. There is no line wasted here.
It's not good wine. I don't care. Do you ever wonder if people think you're boring?
This is something I'm always looking for, where every character, no matter how big their role, is given a little incongruous thing, right? A little trademark that they do, an unexpected tick or a word here or there that hints at a story that we don't know. It adds to this living, breathing world around our central characters, and it's one of the reasons that Palm Springs is fun to rewatch. Grosse Point Blank does this, a movie that I will never stop talking about. Say Anything does this, a lot of incredible 80s and 90s movies do this, and so does Palm Springs.
Get off me! I should never have left the Great Lakes!
In the context of this series, it's also one of the best examples of a film that takes the established time loop trope, the thing that Groundhog Day popularized 30 years ago, and adds to it in really amazing ways. For starters, we don't just see a single protagonist experiencing the loop, we have two, three if you count Roy. We have a character actually engage with the phenomenon and try to problem solve it, without, in my opinion, crossing the line into sci-fi over-explanation. That's something that a lot of other examples we look at are going to do, but I don't think, personally, Palm Springs gets there. In terms of character and theme, we get multiple perspectives and reactions to the scenario. We've got Niles, who turns to detachment and hedonism as a way to cope, and genuinely seems to lose himself. You've got Sarah, who's kind of new to it all, and for her, the loop feels like a punishment and amplifies her feelings of guilt. Ultimately, she finds the motivation to push through and escape the vicious cycle. And you've got Roy, who embodies anger at the futility of it all, lashing out violently, and then finding his way to peace and acceptance. In terms of the loop itself, it kind of lives in this cozy, magic realism space, between having a scientific explanation and being wholly unexplained. Andy Ciara, like Danny Rubin before him, wasn't particularly interested with explaining it in depth. In interviews, he talks about learning just enough science-y jargon to get by and to make some kind of sense without dwelling on it.
They at least have to try a new way to break out.
It matters more that Sarah makes the decision to get out of her situation than how she goes about it.
Presenting the choice to them both, that's really how we were trying to focus in that last bit.
And throughout the movie, there are these little touches that open up space for our imagination. The appearance of the dinosaurs is the best example of this. A nod to Ciara's favorite movie of all time, Jurassic Park, which hints at this sense that all of time is somehow connected and bleeding through in this bubble that they find themselves in. Then there's Nana Schlieffen, who delivers this line.
Well, I suppose now that you'll be going soon. Good luck.
And there's the unanswered question of the goat, why would it disappear? Did it actually disappear, or is Sarah just lying?
Come on. Let's see if we blow up and die.
these little details do an excellent job of making the phenomenon of the time loop malleable, giving it just this little dash of dream logic, creating room for the audience's own imagination while still, towing that line where our characters can have a definitive, sense of what is going on. As a side note, this kind of vibe can be seen in Ciara's subsequent project, The Resort, an 8-part miniseries for Peacock. In it, a cast of characters are connected through time in ways that follow more of an emotional logic rather than an empirical one. But perhaps the most fascinating thing I've come to understand about Palm Springs is, despite its significant differences, just how much DNA it shares with Groundhog Day. Now, to be clear, I don't think Ciara and Barbakov plagiarized the Groundhog in any way. I think it's important that writers be able to draw inspiration and expand on a popular trope, and I have no evidence that either of them has ever read Rubin's book or anything else about its development like me. I have, however, noticed something curious, which is just how little the creators talk about Groundhog Day. I've read and watched a lot of interviews with both of them, and they often don't make any direct mention of it. Which is, it's fair enough. You're promoting your movie. That comparison is going to be made whether you like it or not. And I would imagine a conversation happened at some stage where they just decided they would do as little as possible to encourage it.
It's one of those infinite time loop situations you might have heard about.
That I might have heard about?
Yeah.
So, try and follow me here, okay? You can't write Palm Springs in a universe where Groundhog Day doesn't exist. The creators of Palm Springs cannot be sitting and writing Palm Springs and willfully ignore that Groundhog Day exists. So there has to have been some conscious effort to make it significantly different, which it is, right? It is significantly different from Groundhog Day. But here's the thing, is Palm Springs actually has a lot in common with lots of early drafts of Groundhog Day.
What? This isn't funny.
Stop copying me! Stop pretending like you know everything!
If you took all the things that Rubin and Ramis took out of Groundhog Day as it developed and cobbled it together into a Frankenstein's monster, it would look a lot like Palm Springs.
What are you pouring this kid, Ted?
In early drafts of Groundhog Day, Phil was a younger protagonist, less experienced, late 20s, early 30s. The movie started with the loop already happening. Phil had already looped an undetermined number of times when the screenplay started, and Palm Springs starts with Niles having already been in the loop for years, maybe centuries. In early versions of Groundhog Day, Rita had a boyfriend called Max, and Phil had a girlfriend called Stephanie who he dumped in the opening scene. And I think at some point or another was supposed to have cursed him. The third act climax of Groundhog Day was originally set at a wedding reception. In early versions of Groundhog Day, Phil explicitly sleeps with far more people, and in general the script seemed to have a more crude tone and more sexual references and innuendo. And as I mentioned in an earlier episode, Rita was going to wake up and be stuck in her own loop. The loop was going to be kind of passed on to Rita.
I can't keep waking up in there.
Just ignore it.
I need my life back.
Somewhere in amongst all the drafts and the changes that happened to Groundhog Day over the years that it was in development, there existed this alternate version where a younger protagonist who's in a relationship with a woman he doesn't like gets stuck in a time loop that includes a wedding and meets a new love interest who also gets stuck in the loop. So by actively trying to make something different to Groundhog Day, you've accidentally made an earlier draft. And again, I feel I need to say, nobody did anything wrong here. This is not bad, it's just fascinating. That Palm Springs is not only the modern successor to Groundhog Day, but also, weirdly enough, its predecessor. Hi, and welcome back to Goodnight Rita, a deep dive series all about Groundhog Day and other time loops in popular culture, hosted by me, Christopher Bingham. When it comes to teenage or coming-of-age time loop movies, it turns out there are a lot to choose from, but the one that stood out to me the most is called The Map of Tiny Perfect Things, a 2021 movie written by Lev Grossman, directed by Ian Samuels, and starring Catherine Newton and Kyle Allen. This movie explores the time loop scenario in a really refreshing way. It's really fun, and I wanted to share my thoughts on it. Plus, keep watching till the end for a few other movies you can add to your watch list.
I was wondering, this is going to sound really strange, got really bizarre, but are you experiencing any kind of temporal anomaly in your life?
The Map of Tiny Perfect Things tells the story of Mark, a teenager stuck living the same day over and over. We don't know how long he's been in the loop when the movie starts, but it's long enough he seems to have memorized everything that happens around his hometown. Until one day, something's different. Enter Margaret, a standoffish girl he's never met before, and who is also trapped in the loop. They strike up an awkward friendship that blossoms into a romance, except that Margaret is holding something back. One of its key plot points involves Margaret and Mark running around town collecting perfect things. Spontaneous and often beautiful moments that most people would never get to experience, let alone see them more than once. Two little kids excitedly lighting up their treehouse, a douchebag tripping on his own wallet chain, a bird of prey catching a fish in a solitary pond. Their map of these events ultimately helps to guide Margaret to a way out of the loop, but only after she confronts the grief she's been keeping secret from Mark. This movie is just about the cutest and most feel-goodinest of the feel-good groundhogs on my list.
He made a map of us.
As such, it might be too sugary sweet for some viewers, but if you have a soft spot for this kind of thing, you'll find a story with a lot of heart. A coming-of-age romance about facing your fears and not shutting people out, wrapped in a very well-executed riff on the repeating day concept. Tiny Perfect Things is perhaps most comparable to Groundhog Day in terms of how the loop works. It's a fixed-length, single day that always seems to repeat at the same time. No character has direct control over when it begins or ends, although we do learn a fairly clear reason for its existence at the end. It actually has a lot more in common with Palm Springs. Similar to Palm Springs, its creators chose to start us off with the protagonists already being trapped. The opening 10 minutes uses some brilliant shorthand. We open on Mark going through his well-practiced morning routine and attempting to orchestrate a meet-cute with this girl.
Sorry. Are you okay?
Thank you.
He hangs out with his best friend Henry, and they discuss, in theory, what you might do if you were stuck in a time loop. As a side note, they actually name-check Groundhog Day in this scene, about 8 minutes into the movie.
Wait, wasn't that a movie where Bill Murray's stuck in the same day till he has sex with his hot boss?
Groundhog Day.
And later on, they mention Edge of Tomorrow.
Dude, listen, we're stuck in a time loop, you, me, everybody, same days repeating over and over again. Like in Groundhog Day and Edge of Tomorrow.
Here it does something that Groundhog Day doesn't, but Palm Springs does. It uses flashbacks, right? It tells the story in a non-linear way. Flashbacks are often very poorly deployed, but I think in this sequence it's an excellent choice, and it has a lot to do with the editing. Their use of very short cutaways, with the music mostly constant underneath, there's like little choice bits of sound design, and their conversation overlaps it all.
Okay, forget that. No. You could be a force for good.
Like Batman. But are we talking Dark Knight Batman or Ben Affleck Batman? Because
animated series, obviously.
No, I'd still take the girl. I feel like it would ultimately be more satisfying.
Right.
It very smoothly shows us a bunch of different days. It tells us about Mark's character. It's funny. It makes us like him. This is great. Like, this is a very good opening 10 minutes to a rom-com.
You'd be like the last man on Earth.
There's also the fact that there are two characters in the loop rather than one. It opens up all these interesting extra options in terms of dynamics. Mark is bored of the loop and feels like he's done everything there is to do, except later when he's forced to re-examine his own behavior, he sees that he's been ignoring the people closest to him. He wants to leave, but Margaret is scared to, kind of a reverse of Palm Springs. But it's Margaret's love of science that ultimately helps her figure out the pattern. Margaret is the one with control here. Margaret is the one that solves the problem. And again, like Palm Springs, the quote-unquote science of it all is very soft, and it has more to do with Margaret making the choice to face her issues, accept help, and be vulnerable with Mark. I think you could even argue that there's no science here at all, right? There's no science fiction element here at all. It's just that the magic of the time loop takes the form of something Margaret will engage with.
Well, if the fourth dimension wants to stop hiding like a little bitch and knows where to find me.
Hey everyone, I hope you're enjoying the video so far. I really like making these, and I'm trying to do something a little bit crazy here, which is I want to make this my job. Not only that, I want to scale it so it can create jobs for other people. There are a bunch of ways you can support the channel, but one of the best and most direct is by joining our Patreon community. I know it's a bunch of extra clicks, and I also know every other channel is asking you to do something similar. But if you feel like you're getting value out of what I'm making here, consider joining, even if it's only for a month or two. You'll get to have a say in the topics I cover in the future, and you'll get access to bonus content and private channels on our Discord server. Or if you prefer, you can make a one-off donation directly at chriscoolblog.com. Thank you so much. In a way, Palm Springs and Tiny Perfect Things are twin movies, a phenomenon that we've talked about on this channel before, and we definitely will again. They were released in 2020 and 2021, really close together, and they share remarkable similarities. But as you often find when you research these things, they're not connected, and their development journeys were completely different. Tiny Perfect Things started out as a pitch for a TV series, according to an interview Grossman gave with Sci-Fi. It sounds like a show I would totally watch, by the way. Then he turned it into a short story, and that's what provided the material for the movie. According to Grossman, it was actually inspired really directly by Edge of Tomorrow, which came out in 2014, and in particular, the farmhouse scene. If you're watching this series, at this point, I have to assume you've seen Edge of Tomorrow. And so you know the scene Grossman is thinking of, the bit where we learn that they've actually done this more times than we think they have, and the farmhouse is as far as they get without Rita dying.
How many times have we been here?
This interview is great, by the way, and I will put the link in the description because I think if you're interested in this kind of thing, you should read it in full. And this bit really took me aback because when I think of Edge of Tomorrow, I also think very vividly of that scene. You know, in a movie that isn't as poetic or subtle as others on this list, that is the scene that really carries some emotional weight. It's always cool when you see another creative getting excited about the same things you do. And I also think it's fascinating how intertwined some of these modern examples truly are.
How did you find that?
I love this idea of thinking of the day as a place, you know, events as discoveries, things you can collect, things you can share with each other. It makes me think of something that we all do with our friends or when we're on dates. You know, we love to share our favorite restaurants or hangout spots. It resonates with me because it feels like something I would do. And it's a way of gamifying the loop. In episode 5, I had this whole section that I ended up cutting out where I talked a lot about one of my favorite video games, Dead Rising, and how, like, yes, it's a zombie survival game, but really it's a time loop game about learning where and when things happen and, like, trying a different route, taking a different approach each time you play. And this is what is being represented so perfectly in Tiny Perfect Things. What Grossman has tapped into with this story so well is that vicarious kind of wish fulfillment aspect of the loop genre I was talking about in that episode. It's playing in that space, treating it like this endless canvas where you can learn new things, try different combinations and see what happens. And also, you know, establishing for yourself a greater mission to make the map and to one day escape. It reminds me a lot of how I've played Minecraft in the past, and it's always better with a friend. Dropping into a session and being like, what are we going to build today? You get together and you decide what the goal is and then you go for it. And I think that Tiny Perfect Things captures that mindset of structured play so well. And it's just a joy to watch. So if you like this, what else is there? The more I've thought about it, this really is the teenager's Palm Springs. Or maybe Palm Springs is the adult Tiny Perfect Things. So if you've watched one and liked it but not watched the other, give it a go. When it comes to coming of age, we also have Before I Fall, directed by Rai Russo Young and starring Zoe Deutsch. This is Groundhog Day for moody teenage girls, about a spoiled, depressed popular girl who's actually secretly nice, being humbled by tragedy. And then there's Happy Death Day, directed by Christopher Landon and starring Jessica Roth. That's your college dorm comedy slasher Groundhog Day, where our protagonist keeps getting murdered by a masked killer stalking the campus and has to get over herself before she can solve the mystery. Both were released in 2017, and both are pretty interesting in their own ways. Also, I discovered while I was writing this that in 2024, this movie was remade in Thailand as Rak One Loop, aka Love Stuck. So I do feel obliged to check that out and let you know how it is. But up next, we're going to be talking about a 2019 example called The Incredible Shrinking Weekend. Hi, and welcome back to Goodnight Rita, a deep dive series all about time loop movies, hosted by me, Christopher Bingham. I've made a lot of discoveries on this journey so far, and today I'm sharing one of my favorites, a 2019 film called El Increíble Fin de Mengante, aka The Incredible Shrinking Weekend, directed by John Miquel Caballero and starring Iria del Rio. It's a Spanish-language movie I had a surprisingly difficult time tracking down, but once I did, it was totally worth it. I'm going to tell you what I liked about it and what makes it one of the more fascinating modern groundhogs on my list. So, what is The Incredible Shrinking Weekend? Shrinking Weekend focuses on Alba, who's on a weekend getaway with a group of her oldest friends and their significant others. We slowly get to know them all and see their relationships. It's clear from the start they all have quite different circumstances when it comes to work, money, and life goals. And Alba is the one kind of falling behind. She's the Peter Pan of her group, never growing up, and it's causing tension.
No sé, priorizo la vida, ¿no? Vivir y ya se verá, porque tal y como está el patio.
Claro, porque vives con tu padre.
Bueno, cuido de mi padre, que es distinto.
Alba seems determined to relive the reckless partying of her youth and takes it a bit too far. She has an argument with her boyfriend Pablo, who's been thinking about leaving her, and ends up sleeping on the couch. She learns two of her other friends are planning to move to another country, and although she puts on a brave face, it's clear as the movie progresses that she's reacting really selfishly to this. Walking into the woods alone, she finds herself drawn to an eerie tunnel over a stream, part of an old wartime munitions factory, where for a moment, time comes to a standstill. Later, in the car as they prepare to leave, time freezes again.
Ayer grabé uno. Claudia, tú tienes algún vídeo también, ¿no? Alba, ¿estás dormida?
And suddenly, it's yesterday. They're driving on their way to the cabin. At first, naturally, Alba doesn't quite believe what's happening. But the next day, it happens again, only this time slightly earlier. Each time, she returns to the same point, but the loop is shorter. As the loops continue, we learn more about Alba, about her father, her childhood visits to this place, and her friend group. She spins out, drinks too much, does too much coke, kisses her friend's new boyfriend. She tries dumping Pablo before he has a chance to dump her, but nothing alleviates her sense of dread. And only after hitting bottom does the gravity of her situation really start to kick in. She only has 10 loops left. Before what? On the surface, this is another love story with a deeply flawed protagonist forced by circumstance into a journey of self-improvement. But it has a gorgeous look, effortless pacing, a minimal but effective soundtrack, and it makes some really intriguing creative choices, including one really fun visual thing which I've tried not to spoil in this video. When we compare this with Groundhog Day, we can find some interesting similarities, as well as some very meaningful differences. The loop is fully unexplained, which in my opinion is really positive and serves the plot really, really well. This places Shrinking Weekend on the kind of fully magical realism end of the spectrum, as opposed to, for example, Edge of Tomorrow or Star Trek, which is the other extreme where science fiction guff is used to explain the mechanics and the characters themselves have a working understanding of it. Leaving it unexplained signals that the story isn't about solving a problem or a mystery, at least not a physical one, and it lets us consider the story in mostly emotional and character terms. Like Groundhog Day, the loop concludes only once Alba has confronted her behavior and made a choice about the future. Although I think it is very arguable that the loop may have ended regardless, and there exists this possible outcome where Alba's world simply blips out of existence. This is kind of placed in my mind by the eerie tone of the entire thing. It's played at times more like an existential horror than a romance. In fact, the English tagline for the film is, "It isn't a loop, it's a countdown." What Alba thought was her ideal weekend has become a prison of her own failings. And I think within that context, there are real stakes here, even if they remain undefined. This loop won't go on forever. It will end, one way or another, which marks a very stark difference from Phil's journey. There are brief moments that exist in between the loops too, which is very different to most films, which borrow the instant jump cut language of Groundhog Day. The film plays with these scenes, allowing Alba to observe her friends, to catch little details, to be an onlooker in this world she no longer feels a part of. Another thing that Shrinking Weekend does differently from Groundhog Day, in fact a feature that I think is totally unique, at least in the way that it's used, Alba carries the physical effects of her loops with her into the next. If she doesn't sleep, she's tired in the next one. One of the loops starts with her friend noticing that she really stinks, because from her perspective, she hasn't showered in days. This is a detail that would feel superfluous or kind of counter to a story like Groundhog Day or Palm Springs, but is actually incredibly meaningful in Alba's journey. And this all gets at something I wanted to touch on. The ability of different stories, different writers, to take the time loop concept and turn it into a completely different metaphor. If you want to write fiction, particularly fantasy, science fiction, or magic realism, this is something you really need to embrace and understand. The original Groundhog Day is about growth. It's about altruism and learning to become the kind of man who is deserving of Rita's love. It's a Wonderful Life, you know, where he's just trapped in a different way. Palm Springs uses the time loop to explore fear of commitment, guilt, and cycles of destructive behavior. Edge of Tomorrow maybe has a bit less to say on this front because it's mostly concerned with being an action-packed sci-fi adventure, but there's still some thematic exploration of war, nobility, and teamwork. Shrinking Weekend uses the time loop to explore early 30s malaise and anxiety about the future through our protagonist, Alba. All her friends are growing up and leaving her behind, and the little details that mark departures in the way the time loop works reinforce this theme. The time loop getting shorter, the weekend literally shrinking, very directly represents Alba's sense of losing her youth. Who can't relate to that, you know? The number of carefree summer days with friends you have ahead of you getting fewer and fewer. And her physical experiences being carried over reflects her feelings about aging. She quite literally can't party like she used to. In other examples, the loop provides an opportunity to do these things with impunity, but for Alba, it has a compounding effect. Even if she could live like this every day, her body would let her down. And Alba's reaction to this universal truth is powerfully real. An important idea for this series and channel is the idea that the same or similar stories can be told in wildly different ways. It's not just about shuffling characters and events around. A story concept can be made to mean completely different things and explore entirely disparate emotional ideas. Take Russian Doll, which is another amazing example. It has a much longer runtime because it's a TV series, and it uses the loop to explore all kinds of things bound up in mental health and trauma and childhood. And another of my favorites, the 2011 film Source Code.
Look at all this.
Good to see you, ladies. Up this early in the morning.
What?
Michelle, Barack.
All this life.
And this is why I wanted to share Shrinking Weekend with you. Of all the time loop examples close to Groundhog Day, that is, the ones that are strictly magical stories about character growth, this one feels the most different. The subtle decisions it makes about its central conceit have really elegant effects on its story, making it intuitive, painful, and deeply, deeply relatable. I'm on a mission to watch 100 time loop movies, and along the way, I'm sharing my thoughts on the best examples. Movies that do something unique or explore the trope in amazing ways. And today we're talking about Source Code, what I think is an underrated and widely misunderstood movie that people love to complain about. I'm Christopher Bingham, and this is Goodnight Rita. Source Code is a 2011 feature film directed by Duncan Jones and written by Ben Ripley. It stars Jake Gyllenhaal as Colter Stevens, a soldier who wakes up in the body of a commuter on a train headed for Chicago. Before he has a chance to figure out what's happening, the train blows up, and Stevens is sent to a kind of liminal space that looks like a cockpit.
You're with Beleaguered Castle. Are you functional?
Where his only contact is Goodwin, an Air Force captain played by Vera Farmiga, who speaks to him through a screen.
Recall my name.
Goodwin, your name is Goodwin.
That is correct. Welcome back.
We soon learn he's living the last 8 minutes before the train bombing over and over again in order to learn who is responsible. From Goodwin's perspective, the bombing has already happened, and they're trying to prevent a second attack. To achieve this, they use the eponymous source code, a system that connects Stevens to a kind of psychological imprint left by the mind of the man whose body he's inhabiting. As the film progresses, we learn more about Stevens' situation as he works to solve the problem, and he also develops feelings for Christina, the woman sitting opposite him, who, by everyone else's understanding, is already dead. In story DNA terms, it's Quantum Leap meets Groundhog Day. It looks pretty good, with some interesting effects later on. I always am particularly impressed by the representation of Gyllenhaal in the chamber. His performance is top-notch, and while, in my opinion, the music isn't anything to write home about, the overall feel of this movie is strong and consistent. Unfortunately, lots of people talk trash about this movie, and mostly it has to do with the ending. Around the 1 hour mark, the brutal reality of Colter Stevens' situation starts to become clear. We learn that he was shot down in Afghanistan, and the version of him we've been seeing is merely an illusion. What remains of him is a mangled torso, being held on the brink of death in order to perform this task. However, Stevens becomes convinced he can save Christina and everyone on the train, and asks for another chance.
I know, quantum physics, parabolic calculus. You're wrong, Goodwin. You're just plain wrong.
Captain Christina is dead.
Goodwin allows him one last loop, and then removes his life support, thinking that she's granting him a merciful death.
There will be no coming back.
As his final 8 minutes come to a close, Colter kisses Christina, and time freezes. Then, after a cheeky pause, it starts again, and they finally reach their destination. The button at the end of the film sees a different Goodwin, the Goodwin in this world, opening an email he sent from the train, and we pan across to another Colter Stevens, hooked up to source code.
Promise me you'll help him. And when you do me a favor. Tell him everything is gonna be okay.
Now, it's easy to anticipate the kind of complaints people have about this. I'm a sci-fi nerd, I get it. In reviews, you often see phrases like faulty logic, or suggestions that the ending is tacked on, a decision made in a studio boardroom rather than by the creatives as part of their vision. And while, yes, this movie isn't perfect, personally, I think Jeffrey Wright's character is too hammy, and I shudder at the words war on terror, just because post 9/11 critique was everywhere in film and TV at this time, and making the subtext, text like this is horribly unsubtle.
We finally have a powerful weapon now in the war on terror.
But I think the people making complaints about its, quote, flawed logic are missing the point. Something about me is I'm a big rewatcher. No shit. When I find something I like, I often come back to it over the years. It allows me to develop a deeper connection to a piece of media, and I love how, as time goes on, you can look at a story differently or notice new things about it. When I first watched Source Code, I was at university, and I felt a lot like these reviewers. I thought the ending was a magical cop-out that ruined a perfectly good sci-fi. How dare they? How dare these guys trick me like that? Then, years later, when I watched it for a second time as a graduate, something kind of clicked for me. I'd watched a lot more stuff by then, lots more sci-fi, as well as, fantasy sci-fi, things where the edges of the genre kind of bleed a bit. I also kind of have this sense that science fiction in general had grown in that time and was getting more concerned with things like quantum mechanics and multiple worlds. And some of my favorite things were actually stories that blended science with religion and spirituality and ideas of fate. A great example being Battlestar Galactica, which has spaceships and killer robots, but also, gods and ghosts, it's great. So I was now far more willing to engage with a story that used science jargon as a starting point, but tackled more kind of psychedelic, philosophical perspectives. By the time I watched it a third time, I had spent years as a film lecturer, dissecting stories and helping my students understand the deeper drives that should motivate their creative decisions. I also had a lot more experience under my belt, writing and producing things myself, thinking about story and character, and working with performers. And this time around, I let the mechanics and the logic of the story fall away, and just looked at what had been on screen this entire time. I had been thinking of this thing as a movie about a time loop, not as a movie about a soldier. But what's right there on the screen the whole time? What is Jake Gyllenhaal, a gifted actor, spending this entire movie giving us? And how does the blocking and the design of it all reinforce that? We're watching a dying soldier being forced to keep serving his country. He made the ultimate sacrifice, and he is still being asked to serve. He's also being kept in the dark, quite literally, in a dark place, separated from his superiors, who are deliberately not giving him the whole picture. And he follows orders anyway. These codes and lists he memorizes for Goodwin, they're a really interesting element. Ostensibly, we're told they're for, grounding his mind or something, getting him back on track. But maybe they're a method of control, of indoctrination. And the people on the train, they're ignorant, entitled even. They're, wrapped up in their own selfish lives. By comparison, given what we know, their little problems are insignificant. They don't know what he's been through or what he's currently going through, and he keeps trying to save them, even though it is a thankless, anonymous task. And at the end, when he succeeds, no matter how you feel about it, whether you like it or not, whether you think it's real or an illusion or the last neurons firing in his dying brain, what matters is that from Colter Stevens' perspective, he gets to have what they have.
Look at all this.
Good to see you, ladies. Up this early in the morning.
What?
Michelle, Barack.
Oh, all is life.
So, under all that sci-fi stuff, and the time loop, and the mechanics, you reach the emotional center of this story.
He's done enough, Doctor.
And I think it holds a lot of romantic notions about military service, a deep empathy for servicemen and women, and maybe has something to say about the way we treat our veterans. And I don't know about you, but I think that's neat. I'm on a mission to watch 100 time loop stories, and along the way, I'm sharing some of my discoveries. In this video, I've gathered some of the most interesting examples from the world of science fiction television. If there are any you think I should add to this list, let me know in the comments. This is Goodnight Rita, and my name is Christopher Bingham. Okay, so I'm going to go down my list and describe the episodes. I'm going to talk about how the loop works, what I like and dislike about them, and at the end we'll see if there are any lessons we can learn from it overall. And just a quick spoiler warning for little bits of all of these shows. So let's start at the top in 1992 with Star Trek The Next Generation, and an episode you might know called Cause and Effect, directed by Jonathan Frakes and written by Brannon Braga. The crew is stuck for 17 days in a loop of just a few hours, always ending with the Enterprise destroyed and all hands lost. Dr. Crusher is the first to start noticing, followed slowly by other members of the team. The whole episode is played for eeriness, bordering on horror.
How did we know?
Emphasized by strange, wide shots and unusual angles. It's a fairly creepy episode filled with dread. We've kind of talked about this on a previous episode. I think most Trek fans agree it's a really strong episode of TNG, and I think it's generally a really solid example of a time loop story in science fiction television. This predates Groundhog Day and is often cited as inspiration for others on the list.
Cause and effect. Star Trek Next Generation.
Up next, first aired in 1999, we have The X-Files Monday, directed by Kim Manners and written by Vince Gilligan and John Shaban. It's always fun to remember that Vince Gilligan, the creator of Breaking Bad, worked on The X-Files. Also, one of the guest stars in this episode is Darren E. Burroughs, who was in my favorite show of all time, Northern Exposure.
Hi, I'm Ed.
Everyone in this story is stuck looping for at least 7 days that we see, although it's implied there are more.
Right on schedule.
This woman, Pam, who's stuck in an abusive relationship with Bernard, is the only one conscious of it, although slowly over the course of the episode, Mulder becomes aware as well. Each loop ends with Bernard holding up a bank that Mulder and Scully just happened to be in that day. Like most of the X-Files, it's played with this kind of low-key tension and slightly uncomfortable tone. Mulder is having a pretty bad day, which is played for comic relief. But Pam is having a genuinely bad day. Her loop is used to heighten the reality of being stuck in a toxic environment or relationship, a situation where you feel powerless. It's a really good and really interesting example that I can't recommend enough.
You have control over everything that happens here. And it doesn't have to end this way.
Stargate SG1, Window of Opportunity, 2000, directed by Peter DeLuise and written by Joseph Malozzi and Paul Mully.
Weren't we just somewhere else? Where? Some planet. When? Just now? No.
In this episode of Stargate, the SGU and its staff are trapped for 3 months repeating the same day, always ending with the gate being mysteriously activated remotely. It's revealed that the loop is a byproduct of a faulty alien machine on the planet they just visited. The race who created it was dying, and tried to go back in time, but could never get it to work. It lets us see some of the main characters in really unusual situations, particularly Jack, who gets the majority of the screen time and gets to let loose with no consequences. It tightly expresses the freedom turning to monotony paradigm we see in a lot of examples. In the last act, Jack's reality comes rushing back. The person responsible for the loop is trying to use the machine to turn back time so he can see his dead wife. We're reminded that Jack had a son who died, and his experience with that kind of loss helps him reach Malachi.
I lost my son! I know! And as much as I could never
never live that over again.
This remains one of the best TV examples of the trope, possibly the best. It makes efficient use of limited time by not showing us the normal day first, but having us get to know the routine once the loop has already started. It uses Groundhog Day's visual language by repeating the same shots and camera movements, being really efficient with its shooting. And most of all, the concept serves an emotional story about grief. Supernatural, The Mystery Spot. 2008, also directed by Kim Manners, who did the X-Files one, and written by Jeremy Carver and Emily McLaughlin. In this, Sam lives the same day over 100 times, each one ending with Dean dying. The time loop eventually turns out to be the work of an entity called the Trickster, who has appeared in the series before, getting revenge by torturing Sam with visions of his brother dying for all eternity. It's generally played for comedy once we know the loop is happening.
Did it look cool like in the movies?
You peed yourself.
Except the last act, which then gets really serious and melodramatic. It explores Sam and Dean's bond, but, otherwise it's not particularly deep. In my opinion, it's a fun homage to Groundhog Day, but the late game reveal of the Trickster kind of spoils the fun, and also makes it less accessible to people who aren't familiar with the show.
Cut it out, Sam. You think you're being funny, but you're being really, really childish. Sam Winchester wears makeup. Sam Winchester cries his way through sex. Sam Winchester keeps a ruler by the bed, and every morning when he wakes up, okay, enough!
Eureka, I Do Over. 2008, directed by Matt Earl Beasley, and written by Tanya St. John. Okay, I don't like this one. This episode starts with Carter walking into an unseen character's room and getting flooded with weird blue light, after which he gets stuck reliving the day of his crush's wedding multiple times. The loop is caused by some poorly explained sci-fi guff, like everything in Eureka, and ends with a recurring character sacrificing his life to stay inside the machine. In my opinion, this is a pretty poor example. Just in terms of mystery storytelling, it's full of red flags. The stakes and danger throughout the episode feel really vague and underexplained, leading to a pretty unsatisfying conclusion. Fringe, White Tulip. 2010, directed by Thomas Yatsko, and written by J.H. Wyman and Jeff Vlaming, which I'm probably pronouncing incorrectly. Also, it gets points for guest starring Peter Weller, who you might recognize from any number of things, including RoboCop.
If it is right, then we may well have apprehended this man already. Possibly several times.
This story involves a 12-hour loop caused by our guest character, who's trying to use it to save his fiance's life. Like all of Fringe, this episode has this kind of heightened self-seriousness, thrown off at times with moments of comic relief from Walter. Although I should say this is a pretty serious one for him. Like Window of Opportunity, it explores grief, but it does so more deliberately and seriously. Peck's grief and survivor's guilt is used to emphasize Walter's own feelings about his son. I'm not the biggest fan of Fringe, but this is a really effective example. It tells a compact little story, which also resonates with the larger series arc. It'll be especially rewarding to people following the show, but enough context is given, I think even a casual viewer could have a good time. Dark Matter, All the Time in the World. 2017, directed by Ron Murphy and written by Joseph Malozzi. Joseph Malozzi and Paul Mully, who 17 years prior wrote Window of Opportunity, are actually the creators behind Dark Matter. So there's quite a lot of shared DNA in this one. In the episode 3, which is this guy's name, if you don't know the show, they all have numbers for names, 3 gets stuck living the same day for over a month.
What the hell is wrong with you?
You'd never believe it.
The episode opens with the loop already in progress, and later 2 other characters get caught in it as well. Towards the end it kind of goes off the rails with the androids skipping about through different time periods and getting glimpses of the future. And the solution turns out to be just destroying a device that literally looks like a glowing clock.
What are you doing?
Ending the time loop.
So it's mostly a really fun time, and it did actually convince me to start watching Dark Matter from the beginning. But as an example of the time loop trope, it kind of falls apart. The last act, to me, feels like a cop-out. Instead of a satisfying conclusion to the episode's story, we get a kind of Marvel post-credits sequence to hype us up about something else. So that didn't really land for me, and I think it makes it inaccessible to a newcomer.
Français, peut-être?
German it is.
Oh god. I'm gonna need a drink of water before this one. Star Trek Discovery. Magic to Make the Sanest Man Go Mad. 2017. Directed by David Barrett and written by Aaron Eli Khalid and Jesse Alexander. In this episode of Discovery, Michael is caught in a 30-minute time loop for over 60 loops. Midway through the episode, it's revealed that Stamets is also in the loop, and they work together to try and solve the problem. At the end, we discover the loop is being caused by a time crystal in the possession of Harry Mudd, a womanizing con man who first appeared in the original series. The vibe of this episode is a nothing burger for me. It touches on a lot of different little things, like making yourself vulnerable and going for romance and taking chances, but it feels like it's only paying lip service to these ideas. It's a poor execution of the trope overall. When I try and divorce my overall feelings about Star Trek Discovery, I still think it's bad.
Warning, critical drive overload in 60 seconds.
Can we just jump ahead to the part where you tell me how to make these systems operational, please?
The opening act does a half-decent job of establishing the day's routine, then we see the loop. The reveal that Stamets is also remembering the loops is pretty cool, but it isn't done very well. The time crystal explanation made me actually laugh out loud when I remembered that that's what it was. And the story wraps up with this dumb throwback fan service thing to Mudd's Women, which is an episode of TOS. So not only does this not stand alone, it's anticipating deep prior knowledge of a show from the 60s that a lot of its viewers won't know. Dipping back into disco to watch this reminded me how stilted and awkward it is. The deliveries are weird, nobody's makeup is done correctly, Anthony Rapp talks like he's had a stroke. I try to stay positive on this channel, but if you get me talking about Discovery, that will not last. A lot of people in the comments recommended an episode of DC's Legends of Tomorrow called Here I Go Again, which aired 1 year after the Disco episode. Directed by Ben Hernandez-Bray and written by Ray Utanachit and Morgan Faust. Zari finds herself caught in a loop after accidentally overloading the ship's artificial intelligence, Gideon. Each loop is an hour long and ends with the ship exploding, and we see 13 or so of these loops plus a montage. At the end, we discover Zari was actually injured by some kind of time goo that powers the ship, and Gideon put her consciousness into a simulation. The loop and the explosion were all a scenario designed to help her bond with the crew. It makes no secret of being inspired by Groundhog Day.
If what you're saying is true, and you find yourself in the loop again, find me and say the words Groundhog Day.
Its emotional through line, Zari learning about the other characters and developing empathy for them, feels very true to those origins. Although I personally feel a bit betrayed by an ending like that, it has to be said that it's still pretty effective, and I bet it lands pretty well if you're following the show. One thing I'll say is that it is very self-aware. It's very meta.
Wait, you're caught in a time loop? That's awesome.
I can't do this anymore. I'm losing my mind.
Wait, did you do the,
Fun montage? Yeah. Thanks for that. You're a good friend.
Which some viewers might find a bit much. But overall, I enjoyed it. I don't know the series at all, and I was able to follow it and have a good time. And finally, in 2020, during its final season, Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. aired the episode As I Have Always Been, directed by Elizabeth Henstridge and written by Drew Z. Greenberg. This episode features over 100 short loops. The team on the Zephyr are caught in a storm, slowly getting closer to destruction. Daisy is experiencing the loop at first, and later we discover Coulson is also looping, but he starts each loop charging. We later discover that Daisy loses her memories if she dies, so there have actually been far more loops than she first thought. The situation resolves with Enoch sacrificing himself to save the crew.
We do what we can with the time in between, but the cycle is always there. No one escapes it. Not even me.
This has very strong storytelling, typical for S.H.I.E.L.D. The episode manages to be playful, intriguing, and emotional. It provides a lot of fun character moments, as well as a sad conclusion to Enoch's arc. It's an amazing episodic example of the formula, up there with Window of Opportunity, maybe even better. It packs a lot into one episode, including a murder mystery element and a second Looper reveal. These little details elevate the narrative, which I think really showcases something the writers on S.H.I.E.L.D. were always trying to do. Finding a story that's already really strong, and then throwing something into the mix that makes it better. And reliving this made me want to go and watch the whole show again.
Jump successful, everybody. We're safe.
So, what can we learn from all of this? I think when you look at this list, you can see a lot of similar themes emerging. Most of these stories concern themselves with death, grief, love, and sacrifice. A lot of them drill down into family grief, losing a loved one or a partner, sometimes imagining a hellish scenario where you experience that loss again and again. And a lot of them feature a character sacrificing their own life, or at least learning to let go of something really precious to them. We can see time loops in the abstract being used a lot to signal a decision that needs to be made. The majority of television examples are science fiction. Now, there are a few fantasy ones I'm going to talk about later in the series. You've got, Buffy, Xena Warrior Princess. We're going to talk about them, don't worry. But why are so many of them so firmly rooted in the sci-fi genre? I've had a lot of time to think about this, and I've come to a few conclusions, and I think maybe you guys in the comments can chip in if you have your own ideas, and between us we might reach some kind of thesis. Firstly, science fiction lends itself to a narrative explanation for the loop. It's a genre where you can just find, a reason for there to be time travel, and a reason for there to be a kind of an on and an off switch, right? I think a lot of it also has to do with the limitations of runtime and strict story formats. A more kind of nebulous, less defined loop without distinct rules would be very difficult to explore when you're restrained by, for instance, the 5-act Star Trek structure. Not to mention by narrative considerations for the rest of the show, both before and after this episode. And I think these reasons go some way towards explaining why so many of these examples feel similar, and make it even more impressive when they find ways to surprise us. I'm on a mission to watch 100 time loop movies, and today I want to tell you about the worst one I've watched so far. It's called Slipstream. No, not that one. Not that one either. And it is a glorious mess of a film. It's the kind of thing you go to a midnight screening of and throw spoons at. And I'm going to tell you all about it. My name is Christopher Bingham, and this is Goodnight Rita.
Everybody now!
What if you could go back in time? What if you could fix everything that went wrong?
FBI, drop it!
You get me and my men a chopper down here, and I won't kill these nice people on it.
You gotta get that device back.
What if you only made things worse?
Just a note before we get started. As a rule, I try to stay positive on this channel. It's really difficult to make good art, and I have personally never made a feature-length movie. Nobody sets out to make something poor, but sometimes it happens anyway. I'm recording this in the spirit of having a bit of fun and also learning from those mistakes.
Well, that looks quite flavorful. Is that a decaf non-fat soy Fruitorama?
No.
So what is this movie? Slipstream is a 2005 feature directed by David Van Essen and written by Louis Morneau and Philip Badger. It stars Sean Astin, Ivana Milicevic, and Vinnie Jones. It has a runtime of 89 minutes. I couldn't find an accurate budget, but there was some decent money behind this. It was shot after Aston's appearance in Lord of the Rings.
The Lord of the Rings, Sean Astin.
It features lots of explosions, stunts, and early CG visual effects that can't have been cheap. It was filmed in South Africa and received funding from a bunch of different companies, including Film Africa Worldwide. Slipstream follows 3 groups of characters whose stories converge. First, there's Stuart, a genius scientist who has walked out of his lab with a top-secret prototype device called Slipstream. It's basically a little time iPod that can wind events back up to a maximum of 10 minutes. Then there are these 2 FBI agents, Sarah and Jake, who are tailing him. Then there's Briggs and his crew, a bunch of criminals who are about to rob the bank they're all in. What follows is basically a lot of different versions of how this day could play out. The bank robbers turn up, Stuart uses the Slipstream to go back. The next time round, Stuart gets shot and uses Slipstream to go back, this time with Sarah touching the device as well, so she has memories of those events too. Sarah's partner/boyfriend Jake gets shot and killed, but this time Vinnie Jones has made off with the time iPod.
I'll take that for a souvenir.
The robbers' botched escape leads to a hostage situation on a bus, and we see various playthroughs of that scenario. Briggs eventually takes Stuart hostage, with the FBI and cops following close behind. His partner, Gillian, played by Victoria Bartlett, is killed in a shootout, but the time iPod has been broken, so they can't wind it back. Briggs decides to cut his losses and escape. He takes Stuart to the airport where they impersonate pilots and board a plane. The final 20 minutes of the film sees Sarah, Stuart, and Briggs all kind of just being on the plane, and eventually it leads to a climactic fight while Stuart attempts to repair the Slipstream iPod. This ends with the plane crashing into a mountain, but just in the nick of time, Stuart gets the Slipstream working. The events of the entire day rewind to the bank.
It's okay.
Jake and Gillian are alive again, Stuart eludes the agents, and Briggs decides to call off his robbery. We end on Stuart, now free and in the wind with a working time machine, as he flies backwards out of a pool and looks up to the sky. The end. Where do I even start? This movie tells instead of showing, it's full of terrible stock dialogue and actors doing their best. The plot relies on coincidence and accidents to move things along, and the whole thing is padded out with Garth Marenghi levels of time wasting.
Anything without dialogue was considered for slow motion.
Let's look at the intro. Now, credit where it's due. This pool shot is a really cool idea, but it tells us absolutely nothing. You've got Sean Astin delivering this voiceover monologue that, I guess, is supposed to establish themes.
There would be no crime, no war, nothing new of any kind.
But it really tells us nothing.
You've heard of the World Wide Web? Well, you're the fly that just got stuck in it.
6 minutes later, a full 2 of which were these opening titles, the FBI agents read our protagonist's backstory from a file.
Conway Stewart, doctorate in theoretical physics, Berkeley.
And yet, I've watched this movie twice, and I'm still a little unclear on exactly why they're following him.
Maybe it's a Homeland Security project. You'd be investigating yourself, you wouldn't even know it.
The style of this movie is wildly inconsistent. The visuals are constantly shifting in terms of color and dynamics. There are lots of underexposed shadows and overexposed whites and sunlit scenes. High contrast can be a stylistic choice, but in my opinion, this is mostly a miss. You've got a lot of intrusive green tones, particularly on the inside of the bus, and lots of really harsh, unfiltered spots and strip lights that could easily have been dealt with. Camera movement and placement is often basic and utilitarian, but then there are these bursts of hyperactivity that feel both completely unmotivated and also like completely ineffective at conveying anything or elevating the scene. Then there's the plot contrivances. The narrative of this film relies heavily on Sean Astin's inability to keep hold of the unfathomably valuable, portable, and ergonomic time machine he's built. This is a pretty great car flip, but it seems to only happen so that our bank robbers can't get too far out of reach. And after it happens, they seem to have plenty of time to slowly amble out into a mostly empty street. Instead of running, they get on a bus. Instead of forcing the bus to drive somewhere, they stay exactly where they are in the middle of the road. And then later, they elude the police by dressing up and wearing hats. Sean spends the entire movie insisting that the Slipstream iPod can only wind back 10 minutes maximum, right up until the climax, when actually turns out that there is a way to do it.
Right, the plane's crashing and I have to think of something! Give me that!
Stuart just straight up harasses the woman that works at this bank. I don't know how this dialogue happened.
I want to have a deep and meaningful conversation with you. Every time I get the opportunity, I can't help but fixate on your perfect skin, your scent. My God, Maggie. You're just so ripe. All I've got on my mind is what you look like in black lace panties, Margaret.
If Stuart is supposed to be our protagonist, which is how he's being presented, he makes an incredibly bad first impression. This conversation with Maggie the bank teller is not endearing. It's not charming in any way. If its goal was to illustrate that he's a, socially inept nerd, it doesn't really do that either. There's basically no clear direction happening here. And then at the end of the movie, when everything's wound back again, Maggie's suddenly like, hey, DM me. Yeah. Here's my fucking add me on AOL, babe. What?
Okay. That sounds really nice.
Huh? Also, I'm pretty sure Stuart is robbing the bank. He's not really robbing the bank. He's got an infinite money hack, right? This is why he's in the bank to begin with, I think. He's gonna cash his check, and then he's gonna slipstream back with the money in his hand, causing a paradoxical infinite money glitch, basically. That's what he's doing there, I think. They touch on it a little bit. But again, I've watched this movie twice, and there really shouldn't still be a question mark over that. Right from the start, the pacing in this movie is really slow. There are long segments without music, and then when there actually is music, the tempo is wrong, it's dragging. This track, for example, in the opening scene, is too slow. Almost every scene with dialogue goes on far too long and features strange pauses, repetition, or out-of-place stuff that feels improvised. Why does Jake start this scene in the backseat and then move to the front? Why does the bus driver say this?
My wife was making me a pork chop casserole!
Why is Vinnie Jones flirting with this stewardess about jellied eels?
Eels? I don't think I've ever had them.
You should. Very tasty.
And if that wasn't enough, the flip side of this phenomenon is these long, indulgent, cacophonous scenes of people just firing their guns. Including this absolutely incredible sequence where everybody in the bank is just spinning around, firing their guns at nothing. The robbers and the FBI agents and this random security guard just spinning around, firing their guns while cool music plays. It's amazing. Later, as the hostage situation is developing, we are shown a full 1 minute and 5 seconds of extras and establishing shots. Look at this. Helicopter arriving. Helicopter POV. Guy in helicopter. Helicopter POV again. SWAT team talking to each other and looking around. Cops running. Cops looking at stuff. FBI agents standing and looking. Close up on a gun. SWAT team guys looking and standing. What? Shortly after this, there's this whole sequence where Sarah gets onto the bus and tries to charm Vinnie Jones into giving her the Slipstream phone, right? They go into the toilet, which is green, and have like a private conversation where the camera just spins. The camera just spins around them while Sarah monologues completely unrelated but slightly cool sounding nonsense.
It's a black box project. Government's discretionary fund, stealth technology. British computer experts infiltrated Argentinian stock markets and banks.
And then in the final act of the movie, we're treated to this agonizingly long, quiet, nonsensical plane sequence. It's both a complete tonal misfire and narratively logically makes no sense. It grinds the movie to a halt. They just sit on the plane doing stuff while extras talk at them.
Most people don't want to sit next to a crying baby, you know?
You're lucky we had a couple extra seats. This flight's usually full.
Stuart and Briggs have a little argument. At one point, Stuart and Sarah actually go to the bathroom to have a little private chat. They are now safely away from the violent criminal who doesn't have a gun, and then he just goes back and sits with him. At no point in this 20-minute section of the film does the FBI agent alert the staff of the plane to her presence, so that when she gets her gun out, things can kick off in the silliest way possible.
Oh my God, she's got a gun!
Federal Air Marshal, put the gun down.
Got an FBI agent with a gun.
Anything in that dialogue was considered for slow motion.
For a movie about time, this one wastes so much of it, despite being filled with capital A action. And that's because when you get down to it, nothing is happening. Nothing is motivated. I recently had the pleasure of chatting with Danny Rubin. Yes, Danny Rubin, the writer of Groundhog Day. I'll be sharing more of our talk later in the series, and you can watch the whole thing over on my Patreon. At one point, I asked him if he had any go-to films or screenplays that he would recommend for students and aspiring writers. And he said this.
I've found it's a lot more entertaining and sometimes stimulating is to show the worst movies you can find and have students sort of say, okay, I know you didn't like it, but why? What would you have fixed if you had set out to make it? What did they do here that took you out of the film, and what did they do that worked? You find examples of, too much dialogue or not knowing your central premise or leaning into it, and so the drama is too diffused, or all the variety of things that are mistakes that people make when they make movies.
And that's exactly why it can still be really valuable to share and discuss a movie like Slipstream. With a sense of humor, sure, but also with, empathy and generosity.
It's not always a skill thing. I mean, the process of making a movie involves a lot of moving parts and tough decisions, and sometimes that works in the movie's favor. Things happen that the filmmakers never would have anticipated that just wind up working, and it can work against you also. The things that you thought you could hold together, it's like, oh, nope, that just didn't work.
Somewhere in here was actually a really fun idea. A Run Lola Run style criminal thriller where everything keeps going wrong, but with an explicit time travel narrative device. A story where these different characters all intersect, and over the course of a single day, their lives are changed forever. But unfortunately, the final product just doesn't come close to meeting its potential. And I think it betrays a serious lack of development. Questions about why something is happening, what a character is feeling, what the story is about. And again, right, not what happens, but what it's about. These questions have either fallen by the wayside due to production issues, or never been asked in the first place. So yes, Slipstream is just about the worst movie on my spreadsheet. And it's good to have a baseline for scientific purposes. It's awkward, it's terribly paced, the characters are poorly drawn, It's a complete mess I wouldn't recommend to anybody. But if you have a deep, practical interest in the craft of filmmaking, you might still get something out of it anyway. Maybe. We started this series with a deep dive on the 1993 classic Groundhog Day and have slowly expanded, covering a ton of different media. And today we're talking about quite possibly the craziest loop on my list. A multi-episode arc called The Endless Eight from the cult animated series The Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya. This incredibly divisive series manages to be both exciting and tedious. It's immersive, it's experimental, it's exhausting, it's frankly completely nuts that it was ever even made. And we're going to talk about it. So what is it? The Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya is an anime series produced by Kyoto Animation that first aired in 2006. It's based on a series of light novels, basically like short prose books with occasional comic-style illustrations. They were a mix of novels and short stories initially serialized in a magazine called The Sneaker, that were then adapted into a manga, an anime, a spin-off web series, a movie, and tons of additional mixed media. The series focuses on Haruhi, an eccentric high schooler who wishes life was more exciting. To that end, she forms the SOS Brigade, an after-school club dedicated to searching for mysteries and the paranormal. And Kyon, a boy in her class who gets sucked into her orbit as one of its founding members. Soon he learns that all the other members of the club actually are supernatural beings. They've all been sent to observe Haruhi because it turns out she has the power to transform reality around her. She's basically the god of their universe without knowing it, and they have to keep her entertained and avoid her getting too bored or upset. Otherwise, strange shit starts happening. When the show returned for its second season in 2009, it aired The Endless Eight, 8 episodes back-to-back that were almost identical. Over the course of each 22-minute episode, the same thing happened, with almost all the dialogue and action exactly the same. Kyon is spending a lazy summer day watching baseball on TV when he gets a call from Haruhi. He meets the gang and they go swimming. Later, they sit in a cafe and discuss all the other activities they want to check off before summer is over. They go shopping, they go to a festival, they play with fireworks. The next day, they go bug catching. They briefly get a summer job advertising for a local shop. They stargaze. After checking everything off the list, they meet back at the cafe. Haruhi got her summer homework finished early, but most of the rest didn't, so they spend the last day of summer separately. Kyon tries to get it done, but eventually gives up and goes to bed. In the second episode, he starts feeling an intense kind of déjà vu, and the others find that their powers are strangely blocked. Yuki confirms this. She's the only member of the group who has memories of every loop, but her job is strictly to observe, so she never interferes until prompted. They think the loop is happening because there's another thing Haruhi wants to do while it's still summer, but they can't figure out what it is. They part ways at the cafe, and the loop begins again.
明日が来ようが来まいが、まあ、それはその時の俺に任せりゃいいか。
According to Yuki, this has happened 15,498 times. The last episode, Endless 8-8, is loop number 15,532. It passes mostly the same as the others, except for the very last day of summer, and then, finally, the loop ends. Okay, so, you can't just air the same story 8 times in a row and expect everyone to enjoy it. For context, the Endless 8 saga originally aired weekly on Japanese television, which meant fans of the show just got this for 2 whole months. Although it became famous as one of the biggest experiments ever undertaken by a mainstream anime, and arguably achieved a cult-like status, this seems to have been really bad for the show overall. Even in my own comments, when you guys have recommended me this, you're still mostly really negative about it. In a show that already moves fairly slowly, in which whole episodes can pass with very little action, you can understand how fans would get really upset and think this was taking it too far. But my experience of it was very different. I watched The Endless Eight a few weeks ago, and I basically haven't stopped thinking about it since. I had watched the first few episodes of Haruhi back when I was in college, but I'd never made it this far into the series, so I decided to watch the whole show from the beginning. When I got to The Endless Eight, I ended up watching it all in one day, broken up with a couple of snack breaks. And I've never quite had a media experience like it. For starters, although the story of every episode is basically the same, each one is freshly animated. Nothing has been reused. They experiment with angles, with color, and in a few places stray really far from the norm. I particularly loved this sequence with the aeroplane in Endless 8-4.
でも、何をすべきなんだ?
And this ticking sequence at the end of Endless 8-5. At this point in the arc, I found myself really starting to lose myself in it. It has this weird ambience I was actually starting to really enjoy. When everything is the same except minor details, you start to become hypersensitive to anything new. Anything that breaks that rhythm feels very pronounced. It became hypnotic, almost meditative. By about halfway through episode 6, I started feeling like I was going mad. Like this was all some elaborate prank on me somehow. I felt like I was getting a kind of mental tunnel vision. I didn't know when I had started watching this thing, I had no sense of how much time was passing. I wasn't looking at my phone, but I also wasn't feeling fidgety. You know, I didn't want to look at my phone. I was in it. This was just like my life now. I didn't know the universe was shrinking and this was all I'd ever fucking known. My whole world started fucking collapsing. And then it was over. I really sincerely enjoyed Endless 8. It is truly insane that this exists, but I can't help but respect the commitment. It felt less like a TV show and more like an immersive performance piece, even though I was all alone. And I actually wasn't super into the show so far. Season 1 had its moments, but overall I found it was dragging for me. A very cool premise, kind of executed a bit too loosely in my opinion. The Endless 8 was when it really came alive for me. The loop made me feel powerless and lost, and therefore really communicated the feeling of its characters, who themselves are trapped at the mercy of their unwitting god. It was stunning. It's rare that you experience something truly unique in film and television, and the irony of that unique experience being full of repetition is not lost on me. If I had to make one criticism, it's simply that the story's resolution could have been more exciting or meaningful. During the middle episodes, I, the audience, had a lot of time to speculate about what it was Haruhi needed or wanted to do, and I imagined what I thought to be kind of better endings. I was looking for something more. But even this, right, as I thought more about it, and as I was writing this video, I don't know if I can stand by this criticism. It's fitting that Endless 8 ends as quietly as it began. Maybe it could have been slightly better executed in the final minutes, and I think part of that might be nuances that have been lost in translation, but that's really about it. Maybe I actually wouldn't change a thing. We talk a lot in this series about dramatic shorthand and film language that helps simulate the experience of being caught in a loop. And here's a piece of television that does it the long way round, by forcing you to actually dedicate that time, overwhelming you with repetition and all the feelings that come with it. Endless 8 is a singular achievement in storytelling that deserves its infamous reputation. And I've seen a lot of recommendations online that if you're watching Haruhi, you should just watch Endless 8 1, 2, and then skip to the last one. I disagree. If you're going to do it, then do it. Surrender yourself to one of the strangest things you will ever watch. Turn off distractions, put your phone away, and let it waste your time. This is Goodnight Rita, a series I've been making for quite a while now. We started with a deep dive into the granddaddy of time loop movies, Groundhog Day, and we've gradually expanded into lots of different media examples. In recent episodes, I feel like we've strayed a bit far from the path. We're going to kind of realign the mission here ahead of my huge spreadsheet episode. And I'm also going to show you 4 different examples from the world of straight-to-TV kids movies and Hallmark holiday romances.
You gotta be one with your ride, are you fluid?
Oh yeah, I'm as fluid as milk.
Well then roll up over here and share some skin, bro.
I get a lot of comments, making recommendations, and also asking what counts and what doesn't. There are a lot of time travel movies out there that aren't really loops. There are stories that feature time loops but have nothing to do with character growth or romance. And there are films that show multiple versions of events but approach it more like an experimental anthology rather than an explicit time loop. But keep in mind, these are just my definitions for the purposes of this series. I've thought a lot about it, sure, but at the end of the day, sometimes a line just has to be drawn somewhere. So the way I've been approaching this is I kind of have 3 big buckets. The main category is what I call true groundhogs. These are strictly repeating loops, often a fixed length like a day or linked to a character's death. In the closest adhering examples, the loop will be unexplained or only partially explained. In others, it might have a distinct cause. What matters more is the story format, seeing the same events repeated again and again, with a character able to observe how their behavior can change things. It's often linked, implicitly or explicitly, to character growth and or romance. We're talking Palm Springs, we're talking Tiny Perfect Things, and most of the television examples I've talked about. Then there are what I'm calling Groundhog Adjacent. These examples will feature repeated events that have a similar narrative effect to a time loop, but technically aren't. Or they'll feature what is technically a time loop, but maybe it only happens once or twice, or it shifts, or it's deployed to serve just a really different kind of story that bears no thematic resemblance to Groundhog Day. Looper is on this list, When We First Met, and ontological horror examples like Time Crimes or Triangle, which are great, by the way. We'll talk about them. Then I've got Honourable Mentions. This includes more experimental stuff that's not a loop but it's worth mentioning, and examples from media other than scripted TV and film. Things like Run Lola Run or Sliding Doors for the former, The Outer Wilds goes here, which is a video game, and Replay, a novel by Ken Grimwood. When you get down to it, you might actually be surprised how many examples I've placed in groups 2 and 3. Basically because most of the time I'm working from other people's existing lists, and their definitions might not match mine. I still have to watch them, to find out, so I might as well tell you about them.
Shit. Oh, goddamn time travel. What?
A lot of the examples on my list that most closely match the criteria for a true groundhog are lower budget TV movies and romantic comedies. Which it really is no surprise. Groundhog Day itself is a crowd-pleasing rom-com with a popular, charismatic lead. One of the reasons it's endured and been able to inspire so many other things is that it is a popcorn movie. Just a really, really good one. I think when you try to intellectualize the premise further or deviate from it, even in really cool ways, you can't help but get further from the heart and soul of what it is. So they might not always be good, as we'll see, but they are true groundhogs.
Come on!
I'm going to share 4 examples of these, and you'll see what I mean. First up, Christmas Every Day. This is a 1996 TV movie that originally aired on The Family Channel. It was directed by Larry Pierce, written by Stephen Alex and Nancy Silvers, based on the short story of the same name by William Dean Howells. It doesn't bear much resemblance to the original story, except that it does in fact feature Christmas happening every day. It was produced by Gary M. Goodman and Barry Rosen, and it was later remade as Christmas Do-Over in 2006, which I haven't watched yet, but I will. It stars Eric Von Detten as Billy Jackson, an insufferable, grumpy teenage asshole who hates Christmas.
Merry Christmas! I hate Christmas.
It has a pretty rough opening 20 minutes I wasn't sure I was going to get through, but it does improve once the looping starts.
Look what Santa brought!
Okay, what's going on?
We see Billy crushing on a girl, we see his teenage rivalries and his relationship with his family. At first he's confused, then he uses the situation selfishly to his advantage, ultimately deciding to buckle down and improve himself, taking time to be selfless and help the people around him. It's a cheap and cheerful movie that uses the film language popularized by Groundhog Day to tell a simple moral tale for kids.
I asked Santa Claus for a jump shot. I didn't get one. What does that tell you?
Santa doesn't give jump shots. You have to practice.
Then I watched The Last Day of Summer. This is a 2007 Nickelodeon movie directed by Blair True, written by Kent Pierce, and produced by Tina Stern. It stars Janssen Panettiere as Luke Malloy, an all-American every kid who loves skateboarding and fart jokes.
Oh, that's so rude, dude! The zipper's stuck! I can't get out!
It's the last day of summer, and Luke is anxious about starting middle school, and also performing with his band in front of a big crowd. He gets hit on the head with a plank of wood and wakes up back at the start of the day. We watch as Luke goes through a similar journey, pulling pranks on bullies, crushing on a girl, getting better at skateboarding, and finally overcoming his fears. This is very much a kid's movie, more so even than Christmas Every Day, which at least had a storyline about the parents. It's playful with its premise, but it never gets too complex. It has this half-baked butterfly cocoon motif going on throughout, and this magical little girl, the Nana Schlieffen of Luke's journey, who seems to remember things from previous loops. Otherwise, it's just a perfectly average Nick TV movie that I would have enjoyed when I was 10.
Every single day is a holiday, but it's the end of summer. Can't wait till next year.
Moving into more adult, or at least all ages territory, we've got 12 Dates of Christmas. This is a 2011 ABC Family movie, directed by James Heyman, written by Janet Brownell, Blake J. Harris, and Aaron Mendelsohn. It was produced by Beth Miller and Sally Newman. It stars Amy Smart and Mark Paul Gosselaar. Smart is playing Kate Stanton, a selfish and resentful advertising agent who falls over in a department store on Christmas Eve and gets stuck living the day 12 times, corresponding to the 12 days of Christmas, complete with visual Easter eggs that make reference to the lyrics of the famous carol. Character-wise, Kate starts her journey in a similar place as Phil from Groundhog Day, although arguably far less likable.
Nothing is like it used to be. If it was, Mom would still be alive.
I'll get it.
And we see her grow and change over the course of the movie. We see her sad attempts to win back her ex and her blossoming romance with Miles, who starts out as a blind date. For the most part, this movie is about as good as you would expect, but it is often very sincere and occasionally even pretty sweet. In true Groundhog fashion, Kate's journey of self-improvement is enhanced by the characters she meets along the way, becoming a kind of misfit holiday family that's hard not to smile at. And lastly, I wanted to tell you about Round and Round. This is a 2023 Hallmark Hanukkah movie, directed by Stacey N. Harding, written by Tamar Laddie, and produced by Charles Cooper and Alan Lewis. It stars Vic Michaelis and Brian Greenberg. Nerds will recognize Michaelis from Dropout's Game Changer and Very Important People. Vic plays Rachel, a young woman who finds herself caught in a loop, living the night of her parents' Hanukkah party again and again. Her grandmother is trying to set her up with Zach, which doesn't go so well. But as the loop progresses, she finds herself leaning on him for support in solving the problem.
We are stuck in a time loop together.
Oh, we're stuck.
You and me, and you said you'd help me get out of it.
It's a surprisingly compelling example. It plays on the 8 days of Hanukkah rather than the 12 days of Christmas. The characters have a fun metatextual awareness of existing movies and comic books. They even spend time with some of Zach's friends in a comic shop trying to figure out the solution. But I never personally found this to be too disruptive to the fiction.
See, I thought I was Andy McDowell.
You're not Andy McDowell.
So I'm Bill Murray?
I'm Andy McDowell and Bill Murray, and you're the alarm clock.
But can I at least be the groundhog?
And the reveal at the end, although incredibly cheesy on paper, I think is actually pulled off pretty effectively. When it comes to holiday-themed Hallmark, ABC, straight-to-TV examples of the formula, this was one of my favorites. And I think if you had to watch one of these and you're over the age of 10, I'd say do this one. So by now, hopefully you start to see the common factors that define what I'm calling a true groundhog. Magical realism that deals mostly with romance or character growth, positive, light-hearted stories, and a narrative or visual style that emphasizes repetition. And you get bonus points if you include a few key moments. The confused first realization.
Okay, Dad, if this is about last night, some kind of punishment, I'm really sorry.
Wait. You guys are messing with me, right?
I'm sorry, what day is it?
God, it's a dream. It's gotta be a dream.
The annoying thing that happens every single day. It can be a person like Ned, it can be something that gets broken or dropped.
Sorry, sir.
And the all-important, I can do whatever I want montage.
In the middle of my backswing!
I actually watched most of these around last Christmas time when I first started working on this series. And one thing that struck me in particular is how obvious it seems in hindsight to set a story like this at Christmas or Hanukkah. One of the oldest predecessors to all of this is A Christmas Carol, a magic story about the growth and redemption of Ebenezer Scrooge. Then, of course, we've talked about It's a Wonderful Life, which is directly inspired by A Christmas Carol, and which directly inspired Ramis' direction of Groundhog Day. And it's set at Christmas. And in the great tradition of so many other Christmas fables, it feels like a no-brainer that you would tell this kind of story in a seasonal way. In my earliest research notes, one of the things I keep coming back to is how weird it is that Groundhog Day itself is not a Christmas movie. And as far as I can tell, it was never once even an option. It always took place on February 2nd, Candlemas, Groundhog Day. So we've kind of come full circle, maybe a bit clumsily at this point, back to the very start of the series. It's fitting that the most direct comparisons that can be made with Groundhog Day are seasonal holiday feel-goods. But the fact the movie that popularized this whole thing for a modern audience isn't one itself is just another quirk that makes it truly unique. So in between episodes 15 and 16, I did a huge video that was basically just an entire list of everything I've watched for the series. For the purposes of this full season edit, I've abridged it a bit. I've removed repeat mentions, and I've tried to kind of just keep it to the most interesting ones. But of course, the full version is still available separately on my channel. I don't really recommend watching it, but if you really do want to watch the whole thing, it's there. I actually have a short list of favorites from this that I think deserve their own features in the future, including Edge of Tomorrow, Triangle, and Russian Doll. I plan on making some dedicated bonus episodes, either like later this year or in February next year. And when I do, of course, I'll add them to the Goodnight Rita playlist. But for now, enjoy my abridged list, followed by the final episode. We're going to start the list here with some broad contextual examples from different time periods, just to get a sense of like what we're looking for. Then I'm going to list examples we call Groundhog Adjacent, followed by True Groundhogs, and then at the end, some Honourable Mentions. I'm going to stick a little counter here in the corner so we can keep track. So first, just to lay some foundation, I think there are 3 things that are really important to acknowledge. Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, Frank Capra's It's a Wonderful Life, and of course, Groundhog Day. For screen adaptations of A Christmas Carol, I recommend either the 1984 version, directed by Clive Donner, or the more playful 1992 musical, A Muppet Christmas Carol, directed by Brian Henson. A Christmas Carol's enduring story of a selfish man transforming into a charitable one was a direct influence on Frank Capra's Hollywood masterpiece, It's a Wonderful Life. In turn, Frank Capra's work heavily influenced Harold Ramis, the director of Groundhog Day, and its DNA can be felt very strongly throughout the film. Then I wanted to mention La Jetée, 1962, directed by Chris Marker. A film college staple, La Jetée is an experimental French short film comprised almost entirely of still photographs with detailed sound design and narration. It serves as the inspiration for the 1995 Terry Gilliam feature 12 Monkeys, starring Bruce Willis, and for the 2015 TV show of the same name, and it features what most people call a closed or stable loop. A man who, as a result of time travel, falls in love and witnesses his own death. Then there's Tenet, 2020, directed by Christopher Nolan. Tenet is a huge blockbuster science fiction movie, and its particular flavor of silliness is that objects and people can have their entropy inverted, effectively causing them to travel backwards in time from that point until such time as they're inverted again. It's nonsense. I love Tenet, but it's nonsense. It features looping events and things we see from multiple perspectives, but it's presented in a completely unique way. And I wanted to put it in as a kind of example of what we're not looking for. Like, this is the furthest out I think you can get. Then there's The Time Traveler's Wife, 2009, directed by Robert Schwentke. It's an adaptation of a 2003 novel by Audrey Niffenegger. This is a tragic love story with a shifting time travel element where we see some key events multiple times. It has more in common with something like 12 Monkeys than it does with Groundhog Day, but it's a good example of like an edge case that has some similarities but is doing things very differently. Now I'm going to move on to Groundhog Adjacent. First up, a television example. The Twilight Zone, Judgment Night, 1959. This episode was directed by John Brahm and written by the incredible Ron Serling. This is chronologically one of the earliest screen examples I've got, and it's the first example of a common thread in time loop stories, an allegory about punishment, limbo, hell, or similar mythological or spiritual ideas. It's a powerful episode of television that speaks to the high, enduring quality of the Twilight Zone. Next up, we've got The Girl Who Leapt Through Time. This story has actually been adapted dozens of times over the years as live-action TV and movies and animated features, but I started with the 1983 version. This at times incredibly cheesy and other times very surreal 80s Japanese teen melodrama has lots of really wild imagery. Story-wise, it's not much of an actual time loop. We see the same day 3 times, but after that it kind of departs. But it's worth a mention due to its history and legacy. There are so many different adaptations of this to find that it was kind of hard to know where to start. Up next, another Japanese example, Urusei Yatsura Movie 2, Beautiful Dreamer, from 1984. This is the second feature film spin-off from a long-running and popular animated series that I haven't watched, but it didn't stop me from enjoying this completely bizarre movie. Its dream logic and magic make it very hard to classify. It starts with a time loop, with everybody in this school kind of reliving the same day round and round. But that proves to be the first of a series of strange occurrences. The universe around them starts slowly disappearing until the main characters are the last people alive. It's truly fascinating. The animation is gorgeous. I had a blast watching this, and it was no surprise to me that the director of this went on to make Ghost in the Shell, an iconic and influential animated masterpiece. Next up, this one's fun, right? We've got an episode of the Aladdin animated series called The Sands of Fate.
Al, you said this was a scenic spot, but tourism is nil.
This is a 20-minute animated episode that features a surprisingly cool time loop concept. In it, Aladdin and the gang discover a confrontation in the desert that has apparently been looping round and round and round. Slowly, all the characters except Iago and Genie get pulled into the loop and lose their memories, the loop kind of adapting around them and absorbing them as characters. This bucks the kind of usual convention in a few really fun ways that was surprising. Firstly, the loop having this kind of magic flexibility, like it has a mind of its own. The characters losing their memories the more they're in the loop, and the fact that the world outside the loop continues as normal. It's just isolated to these few people at this point in the desert. It reminded me quite a lot of a ghost story, just without the ghosts. Now, when it comes to Star Trek, there are lots of episodes that involve some element of looping or repetition, so I've just highlighted a couple that I really like. The first is Visionary, a 1995 episode of Deep Space Nine. In this episode, Chief O'Brien keeps being pulled into the future and witnessing disasters of increasing scale, starting with his own death and leading to the destruction of the station. It's really good. It's not really a time loop, it's more about like prophecy and time travel and avoiding fate, but I really love it. And another from around this time is called Coda, a 1997 episode of Star Trek Voyager, directed by Nancy Malone and written by Jerry Taylor. This episode starts with Janeway and Chakotay crashing on an unknown planet, and Janeway seemingly dying, only to jump back to the shuttle before the crash. But it soon gives way to more of a Jacob's Ladder style story, and the loop is revealed to be part of a larger illusion. Then I had a lot of people mentioning this one in the comments, 1999's Back and Back and Back to the Future. This is an episode of the show Farscape. It takes a few different approaches to representing Crichton's time jumping, and only in the back half do we actually see him loop. The story is presented first as a mystery, then as a puzzle. The earlier jumps help piece together the truth about what's happening, and the loop segment shows different approaches to the problem. Up next, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Life Serial. This episode from season 6 features a time loop, but it's only a short segment of it. In the story, the trio, these guys, are holding a kind of competition to see who can distract and frustrate Buffy the best. One of them involves trapping her in a time loop until she can satisfy the near impossible request of a customer at the magic shop. It's a really fun episode, but when I came to rewatch it, I was disappointed that the time loop was only about 5 minutes of the whole thing. If you know Buffy, you know that season 6 is a bummer of a season, right? Buffy is in a really dark place, dealing with her mother's death, dealing with her own death, dealing with the fact that adult life is closing in on her and she has all these responsibilities and she can't keep up. Doing a full-on Groundhog Day episode at this point in the series would have actually been perfect for illustrating Buffy's depression. So although this episode is really fun, as a Buffy fan, I look at it as kind of wasted potential. Up next, we've got a movie from 2004 called If Only, directed by Gil Junger and written by Christina Welsh. This is a pretty awful movie starring Jennifer Love Hewitt and Paul Nichols. Terrible boyfriend sees girlfriend die, gets to live the day over again. It's a tragic love story with a kind of macho wish fulfillment sacrifice element, getting the do-over, sacrificing himself for her, which means it's only very superficially similar to a lot of other stuff on this list. And it also features Santa magic, a huge red flag for me, in the form of this, like, magical, all-knowing cab driver. But then on my Groundhog Adjacent list, we have 3 amazing movies from the mid-aughts that I absolutely loved. Up first, we've got Primer from 2005, written and directed by Shane Carruth. This is an absolutely mesmerizing, zero-budget, mumblecore, hard sci-fi shot on a potato. And it features a truly ingenious depiction of time travel with themes of ambition and obsession. Then there's Time Crimes, a 2007 feature written and directed by Nacho Vigalondo. This is a surreal home invasion style Spanish movie where an unwitting husband gets caught in an escalating series of events, creating duplicates of himself. And there's Triangle, released in 2009, written and directed by Christopher Smith. This is an experimental existential horror slasher about a single mother losing her grip on reality. It has a really dated color grade and often pretty bad visual effects, but I found myself forgiving them because it was so compellingly weird and eerie. It's also one of the most depressing examples that goes down the punishment limbo hell route. All three of these movies were fantastic, and if you like any one of them, I think you should watch the other two. Continuing our Groundhog Adjacent list, we've got an episode of Stargate Universe called Time from 2009, directed by Robert C. Cooper and written by Brad Wright, Robert C. Cooper, and Roland Emmerich. Not only is this a great episode, it's probably the best episode. It's brilliant, it's narratively really interesting, and it showcases a lot of what made that series so special. Up next, we've got Looper, 2012, written and directed by Rian Johnson, who later went on to direct the best Star Wars. Despite the name, this doesn't really fit what we're looking for, which is surprising. It's a movie that deals with one paradoxical loop, a bootstrap on steroids, with really janky logic that doesn't really make sense. I think when it first came out, I, like a lot of people, were disappointed with the way that the narrative goes in the final act. This movie is really just all about family and trauma, being abandoned and the toll abuse can take on you, how an innocent can grow up to be a killer, that sort of thing. I've come to really appreciate this about Looper, but I don't think it threads that needle effectively enough, and ends up feeling like a mashup of two quite different films. About Time, 2013, written and directed by Richard Curtis. This working title romance stars Domhnall Gleeson, Rachel McAdams, and Bill Nighy. It follows Tim, who learns from his father that the men in their family have a special gift that allows them to travel back in time within their own lives. It's a highly lovable ride with an emotional and unexpected third act, although for me personally, it didn't hold up on repeat viewing. I found in particular its reliance on VO and some of its early storytelling lazy or clunky. Still, I think it's really worth checking out. Next up, Predestination, 2014. This is one of those occasions where I really wondered if I watched the same film as everybody else. This 2014 sci-fi thriller stars Ethan Hawke and Sarah Snook, and its narrative employs a paradoxical causal loop. So I think it's one of the furthest examples from our criteria that I've covered. It's also fucking stupid. Now, some viewers will enjoy this, and that's okay. But I found it to be weird, messy, and extremely trashy in its preoccupations. It's difficult for me to say anything else without giving away the twist, but I do want to say I figured out what was going to happen in the first 30 minutes, and really just had absolutely no fun for the remainder of the runtime. In my opinion, you can skip it. Then, drumroll, please. Doctor Who, Heaven Sent, 2015, directed by Rachel Talalay and written by Stephen Moffat. Heaven Sent is not technically a time loop, but effectively it is the same. In it, the Doctor dies and is revived/cloned, each time trying to elude this mysterious monster and chipping away by hand at a diamond-hard surface. He's stuck in this loop for billions of years, but at the same time has only ever experienced one of them. Even though I'm not a fan of Doctor Who's whole thing, this is still a really cool story and a very good episode of television. The Endless, 2017. Directed by Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead. This is an absolutely astounding movie, kind of a surreal, mind-bending supernatural horror with this Lovecraftian twist. In terms of time travel mechanics, it kind of hides a lot of its working under the far more important character and kind of psychological elements. It explores a lot of territory about emotional vulnerability and growth and the allure of cults, found family, and stuff like this. and the story takes place in an area of the desert where we come to understand that different groups or individuals are caught in different kinds of time loop. Up next, The Fair, 2018, directed by DC Hamilton and written by Brenna Kelly, who also stars in it. This is a rough little indie movie with potential, but it's very thinly spread. It felt more like a short or an episode of Twilight Zone stretched out to a 90-minute runtime. Harris, a taxi driver, finds himself in a loop, picking up Penny, his fare, out in the desert in the middle of a storm.
Corner of Elm River Drive.
Each time she disappears and the loop begins again. It has a lot of style and a pretty interesting twist, but in my opinion, some pretty weak or awkward moments in the performances, probably owing to the limitations of the material. Now for a truly amazing indie movie, Beyond the Infinite 2 Minutes, 2020, directed by Junta Yamaguchi and written by Makoto Ueda. In this, a man discovers his computer monitor connected to a screen in the cafe downstairs is causing a 2-minute time delay. Basically, if you speak into one of them, then race downstairs, you can take part in a two-way conversation with yourself. This movie is great, and I think film students especially need to watch this. Not only was this a COVID lockdown project, it's continuous long takes all stitched together to feel like one flowing shot, and it was shot using an Osmo Pocket and an iPhone. Even though it isn't really related to most of what we're talking about, this is such an inspiring example of what's possible on a small budget when you have a dedicated, talented team and a genuinely interesting idea. And before we get into true Groundhogs, I wanted to talk in a little bit of detail about an example I think is a really good middle ground. It's called When We First Met, a 2018 feature directed by Ari Sandel and written by John Whittington. The movie stars Adam Devine, Alexandra Daddario, and Shelley Hennig. Devine plays Noah, a lovesick guy who long ago had what he thinks was the perfect evening with Avery. Then, when they didn't end up together, he spent years wondering what went wrong. When he discovers a magic photo booth that sends him back to that evening, he tries again and again to change events so he ends up with Avery. This is a really good borderline example for me. It's not a perfect movie by any measure, but it's a really fun one. When I first watched it, I actually kind of didn't like it, but when I watched it again, I kind of found it charming. The narrative device is mechanically very different from Groundhog Day. You know, this is something that the protagonist can trigger, and it's something that kind of shifts. And I think in order to kind of save a bit of runtime, sometimes they take some shortcuts. But it's thematically very similar. And if you want to get a bit more specific about the nature of the romance, I think it is maybe the best of its kind on this list, owing to an enjoyable cast with good chemistry.
You know, you could tell that I'm in an emotional state right now.
So now we get into what I'm calling the true Groundhogs. There are around 40 of these, only about 25 of which are really close to Groundhog Day in terms of tone and themes of romance, redemption, or growth. Up next, an episode of Xena Warrior Princess from 1997, called Been There, Done That. This is a strong, by-the-numbers approach to the trope. The same full day repeats, from wake till sleep, unless of course Xena gets killed, until they figure out what's causing it. It's pretty good, but of course Xena's incredible campiness is not going to be for everyone.
Hey, you don't have to eat them. No! Oh!
Then we've got a really interesting feature. Retroactive, 1997, directed by Louis Morneau and written by Michael Hamilton Wright, Robert Strauss, and Philip Badger. Now, you might recognize some of these names, because Louis Morneau and Philip Badger wrote Slipstream. Yes, Slipstream, one of the worst movies on this list that I made a dedicated video about. And I was so happy when I connected the dots between these two projects, because Retroactive is actually pretty great. This bonkers action thriller starring Jim Belushi and Kylie Travis finds a woman hitchhiking through the desert with a psycho hillbilly who then gets sucked back in time 20 minutes and tries to stop him killing his wife. It's very melodramatic, with lots of over-the-top car crashes and explosions, topped off with a kind of a bummer of an ending. The loop mechanic is slightly different in that they have to initiate it each time. In that way, it's a bit like Time Crimes or something. I actually really got into this. This is a great late-night movie for like cult film people. In the year 2000, we also got a really interesting television adaptation of A Christmas Carol, directed by Catherine Morshed and written by Peter Bogert. This modern twist on Dickens has a couple of really fun changes. In it, Scrooge is a London moneylender played by Ross Kemp, and the reason that this adaptation of A Christmas Carol sits in the true Groundhogs category is because they've made a significant addition to the story. They expand it so that Scrooge actually relives the day of Christmas Eve 3 times. Each night he's visited by one of the ghosts, then he wakes up on the morning of Christmas Eve, lives the entire day's events again, and is visited by the next ghost. It's mostly very good with a few odd choices here and there. Sometimes it's very heavy-handed. But it's nice to see Scrooge's altruism journey illustrated in this context. Day 3 in particular, when he's technically doing nice deeds, but clearly out of desperation and selfish motivation. Just one step from true redemption. 2000 also gave us Naked, written and directed by Martin and Torkel Knudsen. I fucking hate this movie, and I resent that I had to watch it. This is a dreadful, low-budget Swedish movie obsessed with shit and gay jokes. It's gross, it's homophobic, and racist to boot. A guy wakes up after a debaucherous stag party, naked, and has to get to his wedding on time. It's filled with really ugly stock music, sped-up sequences, poor acting, unlikable characters, and low-grade soap opera plot points, including one where his ex rapes him. This movie is your edgelord friend from high school who never grew up. Its opening titles and little bits of animation throughout, I think, are supposed to be a pastiche of Run Lola Run. It pays lip service to a few Groundhog Day style ideas, like becoming more generous and befriending some homeless guys. But ultimately, it's hollow. Like, I enjoyed making my video about Slipstream. This is the actual worst movie on my list, but I couldn't make a video about it because the entire runtime is filled with full frontal nudity. I also literally didn't want to give it the attention. Christmas Do-Over, 2006, directed by Catherine Saran, written by Trevor Reed Christo and Jacqueline David. This is kind of a remake of Christmas Every Day, which also aired on ABC. It tells a similar story but with an adult protagonist played by Jay Moore. In my opinion, it's not particularly interesting, maybe even less interesting than the original in strictly narrative terms, and I'm also personally just not a fan of Moore's performances. Repeaters, 2010, directed by Carl Besai and written by Arne Olsen. This movie is really interesting. It concerns 3 young addicts, Sonia, Kyle, and Michael, in a rehab center in a small town that's giving really heavy Midwest Twilight vibes. It gets pretty grim pretty quickly as they give in to their base desires and just do crimes. They rob a liquor store, they terrorize a drug dealer. That scene is particularly uncomfortable to watch. One of them, Michael, goes too far, drunk on power in his new situation, and becomes the villain. I was finding this movie pretty compelling, and then the final loop let me down a little bit. It felt like I'd kind of skipped a page in a book or something. However, I will say in the weeks since, I've thought about it quite a few times, particularly its overall vibes and style. So if you're kind of deep into this list, I do think you should watch it. Edge of Tomorrow, 2014, directed by Doug Liman and written by Christopher McQuarrie, Jez Butterworth, and John Henry Butterworth. Adapted from the novel All You Need Is Kill by Hiroshi Sakurazaka. It's a sci-fi action time loop starring Tom Cruise and Emily Blunt, set during a brutal war with an invading alien species. I've watched this a few times now, and I always have a great time, but I'm also always let down by a couple of things. Firstly, the way that exposition is handled, with our main characters literally visiting the exposition man in his exposition basement so that they can have scenes where they talk about the science and then they go back to the action. And secondly, and it's a small thing, but in the final act, we depart completely from anything we've seen prior.
I don't know what's gonna happen.
The time loop device is effectively abandoned, with quite a lot of runtime still left to go, and the assault on the Omega is only seen once. It always kind of bothers me that couldn't have been more elegantly incorporated. Still, Edge of Tomorrow is an excellent sci-fi example and a touchstone for the time loop trope. In the same year, and I cannot believe these came out in the same year, we got Premature, 2014, directed by Dan Beers, written by Dan Beers and Matthew Horowitz. I really expected to hate this movie. It's Groundhog Day meets like American Pie style jizz humor. Every time the guy comes, he goes back to the beginning of the day. It's surprisingly funny though, and it caused me to laugh out loud several times. It's let down, in my opinion, by a few other times that the humor is unfunny or gross. The romantic plot is very similar to When We First Met, and it's it's very predictable for this kind of thing. So, I think you should watch that instead. Although I gotta shout out MVP Alan Tudyk, who is incredibly funny, particularly in his first scene. Arc, 2016, written and directed by Tony Elliott. This is a pretty solid, grungy, sci-fi home invasion with good twists and turns. The central plot device is a perpetual energy machine that causes a short time loop, and more people slowly become aware of the loop due to proximity to the machine, changing the sequence of events. The whole movie is a kind of low-budget bottle taking place inside one house. Although it's quite small in scope and a deliberately simple production, if you like sci-fi time loops, Arc is definitely worth a watch. Dark Matter, All the Time in the World, 2017. Directed by Ron Murphy and written by Joseph Malozzi, Paul Mully, and AJ Hepburn. Again, we covered this in the TV episode, and it's a pretty good example of a sci-fi time loop trope.
I'm trapped in a time loop.
You had me going there.
Happy Death Day, 2017, directed by Christopher Landon and written by Scott Lobdell. This is easily one of the best examples of the trope being adapted for a different genre. This takes Groundhog Day, essentially, and turns it into a comedy slasher movie where the victim gets stuck in a loop, getting violently murdered over and over again until she figures out who the killer is. It's full of really great moments with surprisingly good character work and a strong central performance from Jessica Roth. And it was such a success it spawned Happy Death Day 2U in 2019. And these two movies together are really, really interesting, right? This is one of those rare, fascinating sequels that recontextualizes the original and then adds to it in a really fun way.
The day reset when you died, right?
The filmmakers are very much wearing their influences on their sleeve. Happy Death Day is directly influenced by Groundhog Day, and Happy Death Day 2 seems to be very directly inspired by Back to the Future 2. One of the best sequels of all time that does just that. Before I Fall, 2017. I mentioned this in a previous episode very briefly, but it deserves a bit more coverage. If you don't mind a bit of a moodier teen coming-of-age movie, this is actually a pretty strong example. Like Groundhog Day, it slowly reveals more about its cast of characters by putting them in new situations. Sam, the main character, learns more about her friends and fills in some blanks. The story starts with a car crash, and the mystery of this initial incident is developed really well. And it explores themes like death, sacrifice, and family better than quite a few other examples on the list. Naked, 2017, directed by Michael Tiddis, written by Rick Alvarez, Corey Collar, and Marlon Wayans, who was also in it. This is a remake of Naked that sanitizes it for a Netflix audience. Rob wakes up on the day of his wedding, naked and trapped in an elevator, and over the course of multiple loops becomes a better man, figures out why he was there in the first place, and finally marries the woman of his dreams. This remake manages to clean up Naked enough to turn it into something somewhat enjoyable, and it actually creates a stronger character arc and story, elevating it from completely heinous shit to a passable Hallmark-style movie. Then there's Boss Level, a 2020 film directed by Joe Carnahan, written by Chris Borey, Eddie Borey, and Joe Carnahan. This is an action time loop sci-fi starring Frank Grillo as a former Special Forces badass who is being hunted down by every assassin in town. When he dies, he starts the day over again and has to run the gauntlet. This has a few fun ideas, but for me, largely it was a miss. Firstly, it's stitched together with way too much narration.
I missed this truck exactly 22 times before. I know I should probably warn him, but it's just so fucking funny. Jim had put me here on purpose. I don't know how. I don't know why. Wait a minute, I've never lived past this point, so all this crap is new.
It has these ugly video game inspired graphics that kind of allude to that culture throughout, but it's really shallow. You know when you can tell that like the people writing or saying the lines have never touched a video game in their lives? The VFX are pretty poorly composited throughout, and the sci-fi guff is also pretty bad and builds to a unsatisfying ending. Mel Gibson is in it, which is a red flag anyway, and he's basically just playing himself. Michelle Yeoh is there, but only just enough to be on the poster. It felt like a salvage operation from the start, full of dumb macho dialogue and pontificating that I didn't enjoy. I will say, in the comments, there's been quite a lot of love for Boss Level, so there'll be people that disagree with me on this, and that's okay. It's worth checking out if you're doing a time loop marathon, but I really didn't like it. Up next we have Manadu, 2021, directed by Venkat Prabhu. A disclaimer, I am not familiar with very much Indian cinema. In fact, this was one of the first Bollywood films I've ever seen, and it's absolutely fucking wild. This movie is way too long, super repetitive, but it's also edited like a TikTok. It actually does a pretty amazing job exploring the trope. It starts with a typical Indian wedding, which apparently is how every Bollywood movie starts, and then quickly transforms into this action-packed political assassination story, full of not very subtle messages about religion and politics. It's edited by a fucking psychopath, complete with mixed frame rates, speed ramps, and weird little animations. I laughed a lot, I had a great time, but it was really jarring. It also really plays with the scenario. The protagonist takes whole loops just to follow and observe the bad guys. Halfway through the movie, the main villain gets added to the loop as well when their blood gets mixed. His experience shakes it up in a really fun way, but also relies on half an hour of padded, unnecessary flashbacks. It's nuts. I had a great time, and I definitely want to expand my appreciation for Indian cinema. And this was as good a point as any to start, you know? Quantum Leap. Leap, Die, Repeat. This is an episode from the Quantum Leap revival, which I actually really enjoyed, and I was sad to see it cancelled after such an exciting finale. In this episode, Ben jumps into an experimental nuclear energy facility on the day that everyone there mysteriously died. The reactor explodes, and Ben dies, only to leap into a different person at the facility and live it all over again. This is a really decent episode in my opinion. Quantum Leap is kind of already Groundhog Adjacent in its overall conceit. And for this one, its creators had fun joining those dots and imagining what a time loop story would look like in this context. And I did get around to watching Love Stuck 2024, This is a remake of Tiny Perfect Things, which follows the story fairly closely, but makes a few changes. For instance, the main character is more of a deliberate dick to his family, rather than being unaware. It's a generally more violent movie, which I found interesting. They do the turtle, they do the fish, the wings, plus a few different ones. The hospital reveal is handled, in my opinion, less well. We see V at the hospital only 32 minutes into the movie, rather than letting it wait and create that tension. There are lots of charming and funny moments, but overall, I found it nowhere near as tightly paced or enjoyable as the original. The Endless Wedding. During the time I was working on this series, Amazon/MGM also made a French language remake of Palm Springs. This one's set at a destination wedding in Morocco, and it has a few other small structural differences. It's got a different intro, it uses a little bit of voiceover.
Le jour où j'ai rencontré Luna, j'ai tout de suite compris qu'elle allait changer mon quotidien.
T'es prêt?
He doesn't warn her not to go into the cave, and that is kind of used as a plot point. And actually, some of the changes towards the end that I'm not going to spoil, I thought were really interesting. In my opinion, it's a little bit less funny, and it also seemed to get more serious earlier on. I really wasn't sure at first. When you know the original, these things can feel quite vacant, like they're just kind of going down a list of events, but with less personality. It's not perfect, and I prefer Palm Springs, but it has its own charm, and actually being a little more sincere works in its favor. Omniloop, 2024. This is a really strong, small-scale time loop about a depressed scientist who's been given a week to live. But we also learn that her whole life, she's been in possession of a pill that lets her travel back in time 5 days. It's an example that's very explicit about its themes: regret, ambition, and mortality. I think it does a good job, but some viewers will find it a bit slow and meandering. It's got a pinch of that wonderful life DNA, a bit of problem solving and loop fun, mixed with these longer sequences that just vibe and show off Mary Louise Parker's performance. And Until Dawn, 2025. I love the original video game this was inspired by, but I didn't expect the movie to be anything like it. It takes some of the themes and imagery of its source and turns them into this slightly surreal, often darkly humorous kind of slasher jukebox. It follows 5 friends who find themselves trapped in a deserted town, getting murdered every which way and waking back up at the start again. I had a good time watching it, but I also don't think it's very good, if that makes sense. It's trying to cram in a lot of stuff, and in that way it's very ambitious, but it lacks focus. The time loop undercut the peril for me, having characters actively knowing that they can try again if they get killed, and I think that the subtler ways that the loop itself could be horrifying weren't really well realized. The tone also felt inconsistent. Am I supposed to be scared? Am I finding it fun? I just wasn't really sure. So that's the end of the true Groundhogs, and I wanted to go into a few more of the more unusual honourable mentions. First, we've got Sliding Doors, 1998, written and directed by Peter Howitt. Now, as a Londoner, I found a lot of this movie excruciating.
Cup of tea? Useless shagging bastard!
But I'll try not to hold that against it. This is a romantic film that employs an experimental storytelling approach, showing 2 diverging versions of a love story. The branching off point basically being whether our protagonist misses her train or gets it. I wasn't convinced at first, and I found quite a lot of the interpersonal conflict to be dated and melodramatic, but it did grow on me as it continued. As an editor, I particularly appreciated that no attempt was made to fancy it up with digital transitions or animation. They only ever use normal cuts, the most basic language of editing, so that the 2 diverging timelines do feel quite fluid and interconnected. Then we've got Run Lola Run, 1998, directed by Tom Tykwer. This is a cult classic German movie that's basically a set of 3 films back to back, each one showing a different way events could have happened based on split-second decisions. It's very grainy, it's very of its time, it's got this like cool low-budget 90s aesthetic, and these stylized animations and intro sequence. Then this is where the list starts really getting off the path a little bit. The 11th Hour, 2016. This is a season for real play D&D podcast called The Adventure Zone, and it's part of their initial Balance campaign, which ran for several years. In this story arc, the Trey's horny boys, Magnus, Merle, and Taco, find themselves in a town caught in a time loop, caused by one of the grand relics they've been tasked with finding.
And all three of you have died.
Well, good run.
And then you're back in that white space. You'll have to do much better than that, loves. And then you wake up.
Awesome!
It's really fun to experience a time loop story in the context of Dungeons & Dragons. It's a scenario that provides a really valuable sense of constraint, whilst at the same time giving the players endless options without the fear of terrible permanent consequences. That said, when I re-listened to the arc, I could feel at times that Griffin's players weren't kind of going about it the way that he had predicted, right? Like, he hopes that they're gonna do it in a slightly more like methodical way, and they don't. And it feels like a few shortcuts are taken in order to keep the story moving. So although this is a really exciting example and it's fun to kind of shout out the Adventure Zone, I'd be genuinely interested to hear or see other examples of this being used in a D&D setting. Then we have Atropa, a 2018 web series directed by Eli Sasich. This is an intriguing and really nice looking web series about a research ship caught in a time loop. It's very much like hard fiction, concerned with space-time mechanics and tough decisions, with a little bit of like a hard-boiled noir love story mixed in. If you like things like The Expanse, you should probably check this out, although I wouldn't expect like too much from the dialogue and the kind of emotional aspects of the story. When it comes to time loops in video games, the most obvious choice is 2000's The Legend of Zelda: Majora's Mask. Ocarina of Time is one of the best games ever made, and it holds an unrivaled place in my heart, but I just never really got into Majora's Mask. Though ambitious, I find the practicalities of the loop mechanic just really annoying. Still, it's a beloved classic with a hardcore fan base. And if you're a Nintendo or Zelda fan who hasn't played it, you probably should. Then there's 2019's Outer Wilds, a video game directed by Alex Beecham, developed by Morbius Games, and published by Annapurna. This is the only video game example I chose to play fully for this series, and I loved it. In it, you play as an alien astronaut launching off to explore your miniature solar system. A solar system that gets caught in a time loop when its sun unexpectedly goes supernova. It's really atmospheric, it's full of heart, it's challenging without being too obtuse, and it's full of lots of little design decisions that make it very rewarding and surprisingly vast. The only other video game I looked at was Groundhog Day, Like Father, Like Son, from 2019, a Sony virtual reality experience directed by Raul Rubio Munares and Joshua Rubin. This is a short VR game where you play as Phil Connor's son, Phil Connors Jr., visiting Punxsutawney for the unveiling of a statue in your dad's honor. And, like, it's not great. Cards on the table, I personally think that most VR games, with a few really good exceptions, most VR games are bad and gimmicky. This felt like no exception. Almost the whole opening hour of this game includes the same stuff that like every VR game has. You pick up some things and you move them around. You get to pick up a pen and write your name. You get to press buttons and open a fridge and pick up books and put them back down. A lot of the story is told through these kind of lazy instant messages and comments because your character is a social media influencer. And again, you know, a bit like Boss Level, as a YouTuber myself, I find it incredibly cringy when any piece of media tries to represent quote-unquote social media celebrities and kind of don't really know what they're talking about. I don't know. I saw people talking about this in the comments, and I think some people had a good time with it, but it seemed like just boring to me. It's just, yeah, sorry. And the last of my honourable mentions is Deja Vu.
Get ready for a game changer!
A 2024 episode of the game show Game Changer, written by Tommy Honton and Phil Jameson. This is the only example I've got on the list from non-scripted television, which I think speaks to just how innovative Game Changer is, right? And in this episode, the contestants are forced to do the same challenges again and again, going so far as to repeat the show's cold open and introduction every time. I love Game Changer, and while this isn't necessarily a favorite episode of mine, it's really worth a watch, and I think it highlights something that is so wonderful about the show as a whole. When you look at this list as a whole, there are far more good movies than bad. I think there are fewer than 20 on this list that I would actually say are low quality. And I think, if I'm allowed to make a prediction based entirely on a hunch, that if you looked at other tropes in this way, you'd probably get a worse ratio, right? While most time loops are fantasy or sci-fi genre examples, I count only 28 on the list with clear sciencey explanations for the loop. Other ones have magic explanations or leave it partially or fully unexplained. I expected to come across a lot more Santa magic, which is why I put it in the spreadsheet, but when I looked back at my findings, it had only come up like 2 or 3 times. Similarly, I had predicted way more examples of characters sacrificing their lives, but I only got a handful. So far, I've counted 28 examples of multiple loop montages, but only 17 examples where the protagonist takes time to memorize something or learn a new skill. I expected more loops to last specifically a whole day, like Groundhog Day, but I found that a lot of them were specified as 10, 12, or even only a few hours. Shorter time frames work well for some of the horror examples because they heighten tension or a sense of feeling trapped. But in the case of something like Naked, for example, it can feel a bit forced, and as the movie went on, particularly in that one, I felt like time was becoming very stretchy in order to accommodate how much had to be done. And when it comes to the truest groundhogs, I think only about 25 examples on my list clearly take inspiration from Groundhog Day, placing them directly in that Capra-esque Dickensian storytelling tradition that I mentioned right at the beginning. Most of these movies wear it as a badge of honor. They are participating in this kind of ongoing creative conversation. And now, in a weird way, I feel like I'm part of that conversation too. Hi, and welcome back to Goodnight Rita. We started this series with a deep dive into the iconic Harold Ramis feature Groundhog Day, and from there we moved into an extensive exploration of time loops in popular culture. In this bonus episode, I'll be rounding off the series with a bunch of trivia and goofs and some updates and corrections, and then I'll be responding to a bunch of your comments. It feels like 100 loops ago we talked about the actual Groundhog Day, but let's start there. Groundhog Day is an amazing, influential classic, but it's not a perfect movie. Like with any film, there's a handful of continuity errors, who cares? I've also mentioned in a previous episode that I think the color balance and skin tones are pretty inconsistent. But again, who cares? Of all the little nitpicky complaints that people have, I think the only one that I found worth mentioning, it's pretty stupid, but technically, in Punxsutawney in February, 6 a.m. would be pitch black. So this scene that we see over and over again, when he goes to the window, it should be dark. Whatever, that's not going to be a fun film. I also think I found a new one that is not on anybody's lists. In this scene with Ned, when he shouts,
Ned!
I think a member of the public, off camera, imitates him.
Ned! Ryerson!
Do you hear that? I'm pretty sure that is a member of the public that somehow made it into the mix. And it's a reminder that for a lot of those street scenes, they had quite an audience of people from Woodstock watching them. Now, when it comes to trivia, you know, this is a 30-year-old film and there is a lot of it out there. So I'm just going to run down some of the ones I found the most fun or interesting. Bill Murray got bit twice during the filming of this and was given rabies shots as a precaution. As we've mentioned before, there were multiple groundhogs, and they were all just collectively called Scooter. According to a website called Real Chicago, they were actually a family specifically bred for the film. This movie is Michael Shannon's feature debut, which is always fun to remember.
WrestleMania!
One of the most touching things that I found in my early research on the original movie is this video of some of the cast and Ramis's wife reuniting to pay tribute. This is where I got that quote from Obama for one episode, but it was also just, really heartwarming to watch. One of the best resources I found, and I'm going to shout out Joe from The Protagonist for recommending it, was the Tobolowsky Files, a podcast where Stephen Tobolowsky reminisces about past film projects. And of course he does an extensive episode about the shooting of Groundhog Day, which I highly recommend. He tells a bunch of anecdotes from the set, some that he's told in other places, and others that were completely new to me. There's, of course, the famous Danish story. They were out in the street shooting these Ned scenes.
Before we started shooting, Bill said, you know what we need to do before we do this scene? The town needs a Danish. We gotta get the town some Danish.
Bill Murray goes down the street to a local bakery and orders dozens and dozens of Danish pastries.
Bill threw some money at him. They gave us these huge boxes of Danish, and Bill comes out and he's tossing Danishes to all the townspeople that are standing around just to watch us film.
A couple of things really piqued my interest in the Tobolowsky Files. The first was an anecdote concerning the very end of the movie. When I talked with Joe and Mav, we actually spent a bit of time, discussing, do they have sex? How important to the story is it? According to Tobolowsky, when they were working on that scene, they actually stopped for a moment.
Did they do it? Harold asked Bill what he thought. Bill said, hey, I'm asking you. Amazingly, Harold said, let's take a vote.
They actually kind of took a poll of the crew and asked them, do you think Phil and Rita should sleep together?
It came down to a girl who was an assistant set director. It was her first movie, but she was unintimidated. She said he is dressed in the clothes he wore the night before, all of them, absolutely. If you do it any other way, you will ruin the movie. Harold Ramis smiled and said to Bill, you're dressed in all of your clothes. Absolutely. If you do it any other way, it's going to ruin the movie.
Another fascinating thing I wanted to highlight from the Tobolowsky Files episode, Ramis wanted to get all exterior scenes in all weather conditions.
We would have to cover ourselves by shooting all of the outdoor street scenes in different weather conditions. That way in the editing room, he could choose what the repeated day would look like and keep it constant, and he would also be able to choose what the day would look like when time starts again.
That's nuts, right? Think about this. Somewhere deep in Columbia's vaults are reels of film that contain these other days with different weather. And if you had them, you could cut whole other versions of Groundhog Day where it was snowing or raining on February 2nd. And the improv would be different and the line deliveries would all be different. My first thought was, that is an incredibly inefficient way to shoot. And my second thought was, that's absolutely fascinating and I want to see those reels. A lot of people in the comments gushed about the Groundhog Day musical, and in fact, when I spoke to Danny Rubin, he had a lot of really positive things to say about it too.
When I first met Matthew Warchus, I had just seen Matilda, the musical. I asked him, I said, look, I don't always like musicals. A lot of them I don't. This one absolutely reached me. I thought it was innovative and it made me laugh and it made me cry. I was involved emotionally, which I am not usually. How did you do that? And he said, I don't know. And I said, I want to work with you. You're the first person who's ever told me the truth since I started in the entertainment business.
It's been praised all over the place for its innovative stagecraft and wonderful songs. And from the way Danny spoke about it, that seems to have come from a deeply collaborative and rewarding experience.
In terms of collaboration, once I kind of handed it off, it was Harold's movie.
Yeah.
And for a while, the handoff was long enough that I felt like there was interaction of ideas, and I was making contributions to taking my spec script and making it into a studio film. But it was really very, very much a Harold's like, okay, we've got this. But in theater, an actor won't so much as change a the and a without consulting with the writer. There's no improvising unless it's being encouraged. I was at the table. I was the one passing little notes to the directors, like, could we change this line here? He would read it, chuckle, hand it to his assistant who would run it up to the actors who would learn it, and we'd do the run through that way.
It serves as yet another reminder that there are hundreds of ways to tell the same story, just as there are hundreds of different ways to organize the creative process, each with their own strengths. I haven't seen the musical myself, which is why I haven't featured it, but I definitely will the next time it's put on in London, and maybe I'll make a little bonus video when I do. Now let's go to viewer comments. I had a lot of comments asking whether I would do a dedicated video or perhaps a series about video games, and the short answer is no. Firstly, my, specialty area is film, and although a lot of these conversations can absolutely overlap with other mediums, that's not what this channel is really about. And the other thing is that, I watch all these movies sometimes more than once in order to do proper in-depth research. I would want to do the same for video games, and that is such a bigger time commitment that I just can't make. I saw a lot of love and a lot of people requesting that I talk about the Netflix series Dark. It's a German language Netflix show with just a little pinch of incest, and I absolutely love it. It's one of my favorite shows ever. It's beautiful, it's gorgeous, it's moody in all the right ways. It's more of a just general time travel show, so it would be adjacent or honorable mention, and I just didn't have the time to rewatch it all. I got a lot of people requesting that I talk about Majora's Mask. So, okay. The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time is one of the greatest video games ever made, and it was a particularly formative game for me. I was born in 1990, so I was the right age when this came out. It's a formative core experience for me. I feel like I was friends with Saria when I was a child. That's how important that game is to me. And also, in the present day, one of my hobbies is playing OOT randomizers. I know where every single crate and every single jar and every single sculpture is on that map. But I've never completed Majora's Mask. It infuriates me. I can see that it's a really good game that has a lot to say and has a lot of fun to be found, but getting almost to the end of the first dungeon and then losing all of that progress because I haven't done it quick enough, it makes me fucking angry, and then I stop playing the game. I think it was like a Freudian thing that I left it out because it annoys me so much. A lot of people asking me in the comments why I didn't like Loki, why there was some Loki shade. And I'd like to put on the record that I think that Loki Season 1 is one of the greatest installments of the MCU. I absolutely love it, and at the time, it had me almost convinced that this whole Disney Plus strategy wasn't a waste of time, because it's really, really, really good. This is a whole topic, and maybe it deserves its own video, but the second season is a messy disappointment, which as a huge fan, is, sad to me. Some people in the comments were recommending that I do a follow-up series about a different kind of trope, which I think is a really cool idea. It genuinely wasn't something I had considered, but among the suggestions are body swapping, which could be really fun. I also saw somebody recommending Last Man on Earth stories, and that got me thinking about post-apocalypse and something that is one of my personal favorite things in media. I call it apocalyptic homesteading. Not just apocalyptic or post-apocalyptic fiction, but specifically stuff that's set way after, way down the line. and concerns itself significantly with the way that people cope and the way that people rebuild their lives or communities, the way that they farm or the way that they do politics after such a cataclysmic event. That kind of thing has always fascinated me, and I could definitely see myself doing a series on that topic. On the topic of time loop as a metaphor, I seem to see a general consensus in the comments that they work especially well for illustrating grief. One of the core threads of this series has been, you know, how time loops can be used to tell different stories and be kind of stand-ins for different things. And when I was going over all my comments, I saw more than a handful kind of confirming what I already believe, which is that grief is one of the best things it can be used for. There are a few people in the comments recommending Scrooged, which of course is a Christmas Carol adaptation starring Bill Murray. I probably should have mentioned it, but I'm not a huge fan. And this isn't so much a correction as an update, but I do feel the need to kind of update you on my feelings about Stork Day. I think when I did a video about it, I was maybe a little too hard on it. And over the months that have followed, where I've still been working on this show, and I've been having to, you know, go to it and find clips from time to time, I do think that out of all the films I've talked about, my feelings on this have improved quite a bit. It's still far from perfect, but I think for me personally, it has been upgraded from, I'll probably never watch this again, to, I could have fun watching that again, maybe, with some friends.
La palla è rotonda.
Now, to just respond to some more negative comments. I still get a lot of people every few days taking serious issue with my first video not having a hard conclusion, right? People who get to the end of the video and don't appreciate my conclusion that it doesn't really matter. Different levels of anger, all basically to the effect of like, why did you do this to me? Or like, if you didn't care, why did you ask the question? Or actually the question is important, you're stupid, right? And, you know, I'm trying to be nice about it, but like, you know, the actual point of the video is to trick you into learning something about films. And if you're the kind of person who gets angry that I didn't definitively say 10,000 years, maybe this channel's not for you. I saw a lot of comments not angry at me, but angry at the Endless Eight, like still, like decades later, which I found quite fun, actually. It is a testament to how extreme and how divisive that arc of episodes is, that I have had a lot of comments, not about me or the video at all, just venting in a new place about this thing that still bothers them. And like, yeah, I'm happy for you to get it out of your system, I guess. But I disagree. I also got some really lovely feedback on the bonus upload for that video. People thanking me for taking the extra time and, you know, expressing that they were kind of seeing it in a different way for the first time. And that was lovely. That makes it all worthwhile. And if you missed that and you're interested, I'll put a link in the description. And I'm just going to wait a couple of seconds for the retention to go down. On a bit of a depressing note, I've been really disappointed by how many comments I've had from incel misogynist losers. Comments about Rita's character in the original film, or on, you know, newer examples like Tiny Perfect Things or Round and Round, where the story is being told from a female perspective, complaining about strange imagined slights against them as men. I delete most of these immediately. I don't have the time or the desire to engage. I do find it like notable that there's this little overlap that exists with film analysis, or maybe just educational videos in general, and like conspiracy theorists, misanthropes, and bigots. With the Truman Show series, the comments I deleted immediately were like really strange, flat earth and deep esoteric conspiracy nonsense. And unfortunately for this series, the prevailing theme has just been like people who hate women. I recognize it's always going to be there, and also that, you know, part of it is down to these movies just having broad appeal with loads of different demos. But yeah, I try to make sure that you guys aren't unnecessarily exposed to it. and I don't respond. And if you are watching this and you're just about ready to type a comment about how I'm a fucking woke libtard who's bowing to the femcel oppressor, fucking don't. Just fucking don't. I'm just trying to teach you about movies. If you're in my classroom and you held your hand up and then you said some shit like that, you're out. You're out. Pack your shit. Go home. One final thought looking at this compared to my previous long-running series, True Talk. In that, I was discussing a fundamentally unique movie with very few modern rivals. A large part of that series was simply highlighting just how novel and unique so many aspects of The Truman Show are. With this series, I had a chance to talk about something that feels far more connected to other films and storytelling traditions. Dickens to Capra to this and beyond. It's been an unexpectedly rich experience, and I feel like in some ways I've only just scratched the surface. On two fronts, right? First, it makes me want to do more research into Hollywood Golden Age cinema and how its influences are still being felt. And secondly, I just want to cover more stuff to do with time travel. And so where True Talk kind of felt like an ending for me, putting to bed a lifetime obsession with a single film, Goodnight Rita has actually spurred me on. It's left me with more questions I want to answer, and more topics I want to talk about. But for now, I think I'll leave it there. Okay, campers, rise and shine. And don't forget your booties, because it's cold out there today. It's cold out there every day. Hi, and welcome to a new series I'm calling Goodnight Rita. Just kidding,